Welcome, everyone, to today's Town of Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. The date is December 14th, 2023. Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Acts of 2023, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until March 31st, 2025, this meeting of the Chatham ZBA is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. Conference ID number needs to be put in, which would be 463-810-656, then hit the pound. Or you can join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. In accordance with town policy, the public can speak to any issue or business item on the agenda during the meeting when recognized by the chair. To authorize this hybrid form of meeting, I would ask for a roll call of all members. Please state your name and whether you approve or not. Jenny.
Virginia Fenwick, I approve.
Lee.
Lee Hovey, I approve.
Paul C. Semple, I approve.
David S. Nixon, I approve.
Randy Potash, I approve.
And David H. Veach, I approve.
Okay, I would ask that if any citizen or non-board member participates in the call via the phone, please give us your name and the last four digits of your phone number for ID purposes only. I'll give you a quick rundown about how the hearing is conducted. First, the notice is read by the lady to my right. This is Sarah B. Clark. She's the PPO for the town, Principal Permitting Officer. We would then have a presentation either by the applicant or their representative. Following that, I would ask for anybody here or on Microsoft who wishes to speak in favor to do so by indicating they'd like to join the meeting. I would then read any and all correspondence that we had received. I would then ask for anybody here or on Microsoft that wishes to speak against or has a specific question to indicate they would like to join the meeting. We would then have, could be some rebuttal testimony. We would then have direct questions by the board members. Following that, we would close the public hearing and go into deliberation. Deliberation is just amongst the board members unless they interject into the conversation. Someone here or on Microsoft Teams that had participated in any of the above. We would then have a vote in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. To be successful, you have to get a supermajority. In our case, there were 5 votes. So you need to get 4 yeses to be successful. And I should say voting today will be Ginny, Lee, Paul, Randy, and Dave. Are there any questions? Paul, do we have any, maybe we don't, I don't know. What do we have in the way of minutes?
I don't think we have any minutes for approval for this.
Okay, all right. Well, I just want to say a quick something that periodically I open up my phone on Fridays, and I refer to it as the whiner line. And people call, and there's a certain gentleman who comes here on a very regular basis who likes to call at least once a month, maybe twice. And he likes to whine about things that I should have done, did do, should have thought about doing, or might do in the future. That's all very entertaining. And yes, he might talk about some other of us here too. He doesn't want to leave anybody out. Right, that's all right. But last week's hearing on 70 Barnhill brought out a number of folks. And I'll simply say that if I can put these together, there are those that believe the Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals is misnamed, that it ought to be the Chatham Board of Construction Error Forgiveness, no matter how egregious, I think is how they put it. So be it. Anyway, that's just how some people feel. But I didn't escape. A gentleman called who identified himself as Donald Trump. And I said, Okay, he was not live on the phone, he said, "You stink." So, okay, well, I've been called worse things in my life. And then he went on to say that when the milk of human kindness was passed out, apparently I was missing from the line. Anyway, that's just sort of the things that we put up with. It's really true. All right, so I wasted a little bit of time. Mr. Ford, you're all set to roll, I think? Okay. What do we have first, Sarah? Let me take a look at my list. How about 23-094?
Application number 23-094, the KC 2014 Funding Trust, care of Michael D. Ford Esquire, P.O. Box 485, West Harwich, Mass. 02671. Owner of property located at 444 Cockle Cove Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 5B, Block 12, Lot 20. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a non-conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot via the demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a new dwelling. The existing dwelling is non-conforming, and it is located 5.9 feet from the northeasterly abutter, 11.4 feet from the easterly abutter, and entirely within the Coastal Conservancy District. The proposed dwelling will be non-conforming, and that will be located 6 feet from the northeasterly abutter and 6.5 feet from the easterly abutter, and entirely within the Coastal Conservancy District where a 50-foot setback is required. The existing building coverage is 1,155 square feet, 39.6%, and the proposed building coverage is 1,170 square feet, 40%, where 15%, but not more than 2,800 square feet is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming and that contains 2,920 square feet of buildable upland and contains 7,340 square feet of land area, where 20,000 square feet is required in the R20 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Protective Bylaw. This was continued from November 2nd and December 7th, 2023.
Mr. Ford?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Appeals. Mike Ford, representing the applicants, Brian and Cynthia Casey, as they are trustees of the Casey 2014 Funding Trust. Brian and Cynthia are the latest owners, the new owners of 444 Cockle Cove Road. They've owned it for about 2 years now. And the project before you today, and for those of you who aren't familiar, I think probably most of you are, this is the house when you go down to the end of Cockle Cove Road, and the layout of Cockle Cove Road actually goes down to the end of the parking lot. Right there on the right, there is a house that sits there facing the water. And that is the house that we are talking about. And here is the existing conditions site plan. And so the challenge with this, maybe there's a, I don't see it up here, there it is. No, I guess not. Button on the side. Button on the side, okay, got it. So this lot's a challenge. Here's the parking lot, water's down here. Cockle Cove Road layout comes down into the parking lot itself and then terminates down at the end of the parking lot, as far as I know, in terms of the layout of the town. This is the existing house. This line here is the VE zone line, the high velocity floodplain line. And you can see the current conditions are that a portion of the house is in the VE zone. There is a second floor deck, which is right here, that's in the VE zone. And then there's a first floor deck that reaches all the way out to the sheet pile bulkhead that is in front of the house that is the coastal bank. Beach down here and water here. This is the mean high water line. So the other important lines on this particular property are this line here, which is the 50-foot line from the top of the coastal bank. So that's our no-touch buffer zone under the wetlands regulations. Aren't before you, but it's instructive for you because you have a finding that you need to make on the impact of the project in terms of its, on the wetlands that are on the site. And then back here is the 50 to 100 zone. So the portion of this lot that is out of the floodplain is this little triangle. From this line here all the way to the back is the AE zone. Excuse me, not all the way to the back. To this line is the AE zone. And so how's that relevant to zoning? That's relevant to zoning because that's the Conservancy District. And so, because it's the floodplain. And all of this lot, all of this area is in the Conservancy District. And of course, we have a 50-foot setback from the Conservancy District in the zoning bylaw. So our nonconformities from zoning are the fact that the improvements are in the Conservancy District where they're not permitted. This portion of the building here is 5.9 feet at that point right there at its closest point from what I called in the application a front yard, because I think the layout of Cockle Cove Road comes down along here. And so the frontage for this lot actually comes off of this easterly side of the lot. And the lot itself is, I think, 7,340 square feet in an R20 zone, so we've got an undersized lot. The buildable upland is just under 3,000. So we've got an existing lot coverage of 1,155 feet, which amounts to 39.6%, where 15% or 2,800 feet, I think whichever is less, is allowed in terms of lot coverage. So we've got a nonconformity on lot coverage, got a nonconformity with the front yard setback, and we have a nonconformity with respect to the location of the structural improvements in the Conservancy District. So a big challenge for anyone seeking to redevelop this particular site. So with me today, fortunately, is Chris Cannon. Chris, if you want to come up, who has assisted the Caseys in the redevelopment plan that is before you. And we think this plan addresses the environmental conditions that exist on the site. And also, I think Chris has come up with something that is a design that fits in this particular area. And before I go to Chris, I should tell you that I also have John O'Reilly, who's the site engineer, on Zoom. Brian and Cynthia Casey are on Zoom. And we have been to the Historic Commission because the house was built, the original portion of it, in the 1880s. They found no historical significance and did not issue any delay. We've also been, as this board suggested, they wanted us to, before this hearing started, get to the Conservation Commission, and we did, and we had an initial public hearing before the Conservation Commission. The chair will read a memo to that effect later in the hearing. And I can tell you that even though it's not evident on the face of the Conservation Administrative Assistance memo to the ZBA, we had a very positive hearing, and there were some good comments from the Conservation Commission, particularly on the fact that this particular structure is being moved out of the V zone. The big deck is being taken away, the upper story deck's being taken away, and the portion of the house that's in the V zone is being taken away. And by taken away, I mean moved back. And so when you construct a new house further back, in order to get it out of the V zone, which is something you got to do in any reconstruction on this site, the house kitty corners a bit, and so we end up the same distance, give or take 1/10 of a foot. It's 5.9 feet from Cockle Cove Road, not right now layout. This will end up being 6 feet. But it's complying with all the other setbacks, except the Conservancy District setback. It's still located in the Conservancy District. So with that, let me have Chris walk through the elevations and what the development plan is.
Thanks, Chris Cannon. Just FYI, 27 years ago, yesterday, I moved to Cockle Cove, so that's how long I've been aware of this house. And I see
And
some,
Chris, I have to tell you that
You beat me on
many
that.
years before that, and I'm not going to mention the date, I was married on Cockle Cove Beach. And so I've been aware of this house for many more years than I think you've lived on the road.
exactly.
So the two of us, I think the Caseys sought us out for this particular petition.
So, I see some things as sort of iconic, and the house here I don't, but the property I do. And it's one that, you just have to say to people, it's the house at the end of Cockle Cove, adjacent to the parking lot, and they know the house, if they know Cockle Cove. So it was I didn't take it lightly, looking at demolishing the house and putting up a new one. We did look into that. We knew that because of costs that FEMA would impose in being in the VE zone, we would have to move it because of the level of construction we'd have to do, and the increased costs of doing that just didn't make sense. We have 6'8" ceilings on the first floor, and the original house, though historic, was probably a boathouse, and the roof was actually down at the first floor most likely, and was somewhere along the way lifted up, and I think that's why the ceilings were so low. But there was nothing I could do to make them any higher. So with that, I decided to try and minimize the addition of square footage at the first floor, or coverage at the first floor. We had 2-foot overhangs. That was a benefit to us because in the interpretation, 2-foot overhangs are coverage. So we did utilize that, and I believe added just a touch more. I think there's actually some more coverage on here that we just can't see. There was a porch, and I have pictures from years and years ago that Spencer Kennard was kind enough to show me that show a porch. And if you look underneath the deck, the foundation is still there. So I think there's coverage that we just don't account for, can't account for until that deck comes up. So be it. We've done a pretty good job with what we have to show you what's there, and account for the coverage that we will be imposing onto the, reimposing back onto the lot. So the idea was to move the house back, get it within the AE area, elevate it 2.5 feet, top of first floor, with the anticipation that at some point along the way, FEMA was going to most likely find higher elevations to impose onto us. We don't know when, but it will happen eventually. And so we're trying to think ahead a little bit. So we didn't push it too far, but just a touch. The elevations, inside, let me just say that all the components that are in the inside of this current house. And so we didn't gild the lily here. If you know me, it's not what I do. We just wanted to get the same components in a more organized fashion. Not huge bedrooms. It's a 3-bedroom house. They're not huge, but they do function better than what's there currently. I did add a deck at the second floor. There's currently one, but it's sitting up over top of the part of the first floor. So with the house itself, it's going to look a little bit bigger, and I think my elevations show pretty well with what's there and what will be there, that as you come down Cockle Cove, it's going to appear a little bit bigger, but as you're in the parking lot, it actually appears a little bit smaller and more compact. And I tried to work with something that had the character of something that should have always been there or could have always been there, and I think it's fairly successful in doing that. I think it will look more like it's always been there than what's currently there, which looks like something that maybe happened in the 50s, 60s, when someone was attempting a bad idea of modern. Yes, I can say that. So, my idea was to just get something that really looked like it kind of fit. I'm very sensitive about Cockle Cove Road. It's been able to do a good job of maintaining a character of old cottages, and I didn't feel it was appropriate to go with something grand, nor do I think you would have approved it. So, that was how I approached it, was, keep it simple, you know, accomplish the goal of getting the rooms inside that we needed and make it a nice home, hopefully for the next 100 years.
And certainly Chris will be available for questions, Mr. Chairman. I also have, and I'd like him to address the board, albeit briefly, John O'Reilly on Zoom. And I think it's important, particularly where the board was unanimous in their direction to us that they wanted us to get to conservation before this public hearing. And inasmuch as there isn't a lot in the conservation memo that gives you an idea of what occurred there, I wanted John O'Reilly to simply kind of highlight what the environmental benefits were to this plan that were presented to the commission that we believe got a favorable reaction. So, John, if you're on there, if you could just speak to the board on that briefly.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. As Mike was saying, we did present this project to the commission last week and did have a very good discussion. I think it was a positive discussion. And what we are attempting to do, and Mike summarized it very nicely, is we are pulling all structure, deck and house out of the velocity zone. It represents the removal of the deck. The decks and the house represent about 1,100 square feet of structure being removed from the velocity zone, which is a significant benefit to prevention of storm damage prevention, storm damage. The overall site coverage we're proposing is about 200 square feet less than what's currently there. So even though Chris had talked about the house is getting somewhat larger, his work has actually condensed it, and we were able to show a net reduction once you accounted for the removal of the decks and the pulling back of the structure. So the foundation is designed to accommodate the storm surge. So what will happen once the home is constructed is that floodwaters that do reach the house will be able to flow into the basement and then out of the basement area where that currently does not exist. So we're actually improving the flood storage as well of this particular area. As minute as it is a benefit. We are proposing from a ecological point of view, where the deck is now. We have a great number of native shrubs and plantings that are going in. We are proposing a patio on the property that will address some of the outdoor activities that the Casey's would like to continue to use. So that's really, in a nutshell, the proposal. As I said, Conservation Commission conversation was pretty positive, and they've asked us to look at a couple things with regards to the patio, but again, I think it was a positive discussion. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, John. So, Mr. Chairman, before I get to the criteria, a couple of metrics, just an overview before we get into the criteria. The building coverage, as Chris said, increases, but it's only 15 square feet. So it's not a large increase in building coverage. There is a increase in gross floor area of about 200 square feet or so, give or take, a little bit more than that. The basement is just a crawl space. It's 5'6", so it's 5 feet 6. So it could be an area. It will provide the flood storage capacity that John's talked about, so it's FEMA compliant, but it could be an area for the storage they're looking for in terms of kayaks or other things of that, because there's no place for a garage, obviously, on this particular site. So about 200 square feet or so gross floor area coverage. And as Chris indicated, this structure is about 6 feet higher in height. It's 28 feet high. I think the existing one is somewhere just shy of 23. So there is an increase in height in that regard. So those are the key metrics that I just wanted to bring to your attention before I kind of run through the criteria. So, again, it's in the R20 zone. Under number one, adequacy of the size of the site. The site is non-conforming, obviously in terms of size, both in terms of minimum lot area, it being 7,300 plus square feet, where 20,000 is required today. Not uncommon in this particular area of town. The buildable upland, because of the floodplain that has marched landward, is now down to 2,900 plus square feet. But we suggest to you that the size of the site is adequate in terms of this particular project. And that's principally because of the applicant's willingness to build new outside the V-zone. And so, fortunately, the V-zone only goes back to that line that you can see. And as Chris indicated, working with the applicants, the decision was made to raise the house up a foot or maybe 2 feet, I guess. 2.5. 2.5 feet above that base flood elevation required, so as to account for, over the next 50 or 100 years, certainly they want this house to last that long, increases in that V-zone. So we don't find ourselves in a non-conforming condition after building it in 5 years or something. So, and they have the opportunity to do that now. It's good foresight, it's good planning, we think, and meets the purpose and intent of the FEMA requirements. The other thing is that the increase we'd suggest to you in the coverage of 15 feet is not substantial. And so we'd suggest that this site is adequate the way the applicants have brought the design with Chris's help and assistance and John's help and assistance before you. Compatibility of the size of the proposed structure with neighboring properties. This house is, while a little bit larger, as Chris said, not substantially the 15 square foot in footprint. And as Chris said, the way he's shaped it on the site, on the parking lot, from that view on that side, it actually is not going to look as large, he believes, as the one that's there. And I think so, given the elevations that he's designed and the board has before it. But that's obviously a decision you need to make. 3, the extent of the increase in non-conforming nature of the structure or use. The lot coverage is increased by 15%, so there's an increase. Other than that, there isn't any other increase in nonconformities. All setbacks meet the dimensional setbacks, except that one to the east, which stays about the same. It's 5.9 at its closest point, and now it's 6 feet at its closest point, so just about the same. And it's still located in the Conservancy District. So we've kept any increase in nonconformities really down to the 15 square feet of building coverage. Suitability of the site, including but not limited to impact on neighboring properties or the natural environment, including slopes, vegetation, wetlands, groundwater, water bodies, and stormwater runoff. We don't believe that this will have any impact in terms of views and vistas for the neighbors. The chair will read a number of letters that came in from the neighbors. The Caseys have been very proactive in reaching out to the neighborhood. They've provided their plans to their neighbors along the way and got that input. And I think the members will see that when you look at or hear the letters that are entered into the record in support of the proposal. In terms of wetlands, we believe that on January 3rd, the Conservation Commission will issue an order of conditions. One of the things they asked us to consider, just so you know, that John didn't mention, was there is an area where there is a swing set proposed on the site, and they were wondering whether that could be a little smaller. That's there for the benefit of their children, and it's placed in a location that allows the Caseys to be able to look in that area and make sure that everything is going on in a safe manner. So we believe we'll come back with something there that the Conservation Commission can approve. The other issue was whether the patio that was proposed would be, it is dry laid, and they wanted us to kind of take a look at that. And if anything, that might shrink a little bit. So we believe there will be approval from the Conservation Commission for all the reasons that Mr. O'Reilly placed in the record before you. Impact of scale, siting, and mass on the neighborhood, visual character, including views, vistas, and streetscapes. Again, we don't believe there'll be an impact on the views, the way this house is situated. The other houses in this particular area are lined up with different view sheds, and it really doesn't impact that. And frankly, we'd suggest that the removal of that large deck that goes all the way out to the top of the wall, and that big second floor deck that's there now being gone and the house being pushed back, that while it's not really a streetscape, the view from the water will be much improved in looking at this house on the site than the one that's there now. And the same will be true of the view from the parking lot if the board uses that as a public view shed. In terms of compatibility of proposed use with neighboring uses, it's compatible. It will continue to be single-family residential as it has been, continue to be limited to 3 bedrooms. Adequacy of method of sewage disposal, source of water and drainage. The current septic system is sufficient. There are comments from the Board of Health that the chair will read. We don't think it'll have any impact on traffic flow and safety. We're sure, given its location near the busy parking lot during the summer months, that the board will have its standard conditions there, particularly keeping the construction vehicles on site during that period. Noise and litter, we don't believe will be an issue. There are adequate utilities and other public services. This is one where your new finding 12, I'd commend that the board take a look at. That requires you to make a finding as to the extent of lateral proposed expansion in the floodplain and of impervious areas on the site. And the new dwelling is, as indicated on the plans and as spoken to by Mr. O'Reilly, is moved back on the site. It's located out of the VE zone. The new dwelling only has an increase of 15 square feet in building coverage, and that lateral expansion is offset. There is currently a non-complying cellar under the house, a portion of which is in the V zone, a full cellar there that's being eliminated. We're now just going to have that crawl space. And there is a reduction in that 0 to 50 area of structures that currently exist in the V zone. And the proposed driveway is continued to be pervious as a shell driveway. So we think this site gets a plus mark in terms of the floodplain and lateral expansion within the floodplain. If anything, this allows for greater flood storage capacity on this particular site and greater compliance with the FEMA regulations. So that would be our presentation. We think on balance, the ultimate finding that you need to make, that this will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, is one that we can and would encourage you to make in this case. Happy to take questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there anyone here today or on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, indicate you'd like to join the discussion.
I see no one to speak in favor.
Okay, I will read the correspondence. First is from Conservation Commission. Crystal Keon, the Conservation Administrative Assistant, writes, the applicant has filed a notice of intent with Conservation. Project was heard on December 6th and scheduled for a follow-up on January 3rd. The project will then be conditioned to meet the performance standards under the Wetlands Protection Act and the Town of Local Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 272, and regulations promulgated thereunder, if approved. Judith Giorgio writes on 10/31, she is the health agent for the town. I have reviewed the plan to demo and build a new dwelling. The applicant is proposing a new 3-bedroom dwelling to replace the existing one. The existing septic system will be used for a new construction and must maintain the required setbacks to the dwelling. The property has been deed restricted to 3 bedrooms. I have no concerns. Christina Bassett writes to us on October 17th. She is the liaison for the Historic Commission. And she writes, attached, please find the application package and request for comment. Well, the comment is the Chatham Historical Commission heard this application in January of 2023 and found the home to be not historically significant and did not impose a demolition delay. Then we have an email. This is from Allison and Andres Danziger. They're at 47 Cranberry Way. They write on November 1st, we're writing as neighbors. We bought a cottage at 47 Cranberry Way in 2018, and since then have fallen in love with the neighborhood that is Cockle Cove neighborhood, and especially our little beachfront. As regular visitors of the beach, we watched the house at 444, sat on the market for over a year, hoping that someone would buy it and love the house and the beach as much as we do. Cynthia and Brian are those people, and their plans for the property not only will ensure that in some terrible storm of the future, we do not have a house sitting on our beachfront, but also that the home they have designed fits beautifully into the neighborhood. It is not some giant, overly modernized home that doesn't fit into South Chatham. Instead, it is a beautiful, traditional-looking Cape cottage that is set back a bit from the beach and fits into the surrounding neighborhood. Mr. Cannon, is one of these folks related to you? This is a wonderful... Then we have another email. This is from, well, my name is Clarence Watson from 7 Island View Lane. Ryan and Cynthia live in our neighborhood. My wife, Donetta DeTulio, and I support their renovation plans and believe the new structure will fit in nicely. Then we have a letter. This is from Peter and Cheryl Treadway, 18 Deer Meadow Lane. Our names, this was written on November 1st. Our names are Peter and Cheryl Treadway. We reside at 18 Deer Meadow Lane in Chatham and have been residents of Chatham since 1999. Chatham is a very special place, and we are writing to you on behalf of our dear friends and wonderful Chatham residents, the Caseys. The Caseys purchased this home in 2020 and are living there full-time with their 2 special needs sons, along with their elderly parents. The purpose of this letter is to share with you that they are a very nice family, a charitable family, and have committed to retiring in Chatham. They are requesting improvements to this property to ensure it complies with town regs and accommodates the needs of their sons and aging parents. We are asking for your consideration to approve their request to have the property moved back 5 to 7 feet to comply with flood regulations and to support the modest 200-square-foot addition to accommodate the special needs of their family. Thank you for your time and attention to this zoning matter. Then we have a short email from Mark Reith, R-I-E-T-H. Writes on November 1st, in reference to the November 2nd meeting, I'm the owner of the property next door at 440 Cockle Cove Road. I would support the project as long as work is done in consideration of limiting construction in peak summer time. Thank you. Prost. And then we have a note from Jennifer Ives. She writes on October 30th, I would like to give my full support and enthusiasm to the renovation. The house definitely needs an upgrade, and the Caseys will renovate the house so that it fits in well with our neighborhood and keeps with the modest style of traditional homes. The Caseys live in Chatham year-round, and they are wonderful neighbors. And I think... yeah. This is a different form. At any rate, it's written on October 21st from Christopher and Sheila Cook of 19 Island View Lane. We are in full support of the special permit. We have reviewed the plans and feel it will add to the quality and appearance of the neighborhood. Brian and Cynthia have been mindful to keep the look similar to the existing. The landscape will enhance the neighborhood as well. We recommend you grant them a special permit. And that's the extent of the correspondence. Is there anyone here today or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak either against this application or has a specific question? If so, would you please indicate you'd like to join the meeting?
There's no one with a question or to speak in opposition.
Okay, we'll have questions from the board. We'll start with Dave Veach.
I have no questions at this time, Dave.
Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I always ask about gross floor area, and I just wanted, you made us do the math here a little bit, but it looks like the difference is just 200 square feet, is that it?
Approximately on page R, REG.2 of Chris's drawings, Chris did a table for you.
Yeah, so when I
Yeah.
look, yeah, you didn't really make us do the math, but
Right.
you made me study it a little, and there's a lot
Okay.
of numbers here. So
But it's about 200 square feet, yes.
that's it, so
That's
you're
it,
gonna renew.
in terms of gross,
rebuild
and
this whole
15
house?
feet
Yeah.
footprint.
And you're only asking for a 200 square foot addition in terms of living space.
That's correct.
Great, thanks.
I have a question either for Chris or Jay. In FEMA regulations, is there a minimum height for the basement?
Yeah, that's one thing that I just noticed on the plan tonight. You can't have a basement in a floodplain, and although they're calling this a crawl space, it's considered a basement if the lowest floor, the slab, is below the lowest adjacent grade. So they'll have to pick that slab up so it's above lowest adjacent grade.
So how many feet are we talking about?
It all depends on the lowest adjacent grade.
Can you give me a little clarity on that? Because I read that you can be 1 foot below the opening.
No, the flood vents have to be within a foot of the floor slab,
Right, but
but the floor slab has to be above the lowest adjacent grade.
above the lowest adjacent
They
grade.
consider it a
Got
basement, no matter the height of the walls, if the floor is below grade on all 4 sides.
Okay,
So at some point along that wall, it has to be above
okay.
the lowest adjacent grade.
So obviously, Mr. Chairman, we would accept a condition that we file a revised plan to bring that into conformance with whatever Jay says is the height.
Okay, so Jay or Chris, having done that, is there a minimum height that you have to have for that basement? Meaning up to the first floor?
No, I mean, if all I need to do is come up a foot with gravel, or I don't even know if it's gonna be a slab, but at the very least gravel. If all I have to do is come up a foot, it just means that it's, 4'6" in there versus 5'6". Either way, it's not the kind of place that anybody's gonna go walking around without knocking their heads. So it's really just a storage space. No mechanical can be there.
So you wouldn't have to raise the whole building?
No.
No, okay. Good. Paul?
Yeah, I think that I didn't have any questions other than what Randy raised, and you've clarified for me that it will not raise the building, just to make that lower space more confined. The
Right.
height will be lower.
As I understand it, Paul, it'll make it 4'6" as opposed to 5'6".
Okay.
Right.
I have no other questions.
Lee?
I have no questions.
Jenny?
Okay, just one more clarification on that. The total increase in height will be 5.6 feet though, right, from the existing?
The increase
not
in
true.
height of the ridge, I believe that's correct. The increase to the first floor, it will go up 2.5 feet from where it currently is. Currently, it's at 12.9.
Okay.
It will go up to 15.4,
So when you were talking
where
about,
flood is 12, 11,
Okay.
11 or 12.
so not increasing the total building height that was discussed and proposed, you're only talking about that elevation on that first
That's
crawl
right.
space.
That
Okay.
crawl space, rather than being 5'6" from its level, will be 4'6".
Okay.
That
It's
will
just
come
a
up a foot.
coincidence that the house, the total increase of the house is 5.6. I just wanted to make sure I was talking about the right thing.
It is a
Okay.
coincidence, you're correct.
You did a great job, Mr. Ford, Mr. Cannon, and Mr. O'Reilly in answering questions that I did have, so I don't have any further questions.
Dave, I did have a question that arose.
Sure, Dave Veach.
I just wanted to check, Chris, and I see that you've built some extra height into this, so you're 2.5 feet above the existing, but how much did you add over what you would need to do, the minimum to meet the floodplain regulations?
So we have to be 1 foot above the flood
Yeah.
to top first floor, I believe it is,
Is it-
in the
okay.
AE zone.
Okay, so,
So it would have been somewhat similar to what's currently there, but we really weren't comfortable that that was going to be wise for the future.
okay, so you actually went about 2.5 feet
2.5
above
feet.
what the minimum would have been
Right.
under the current. Jay, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, and with the existing bylaw, if they were just elevating the existing structure, they'd be limited to how high they could raise that. It would only be able to meet the minimum standard, which is 1 foot above.
Okay,
But on a demo rebuild, we're allowing them to go higher just for kind of future-proofing this. We've already seen these houses have to get raised multiple times down in the Little Beach area.
I know, and we've been involved in some of that. I
Right,
mean, I think it's a great idea. I was just curious as to how much more it would, what the regulation minimum was. Okay, thanks, Steve.
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
And Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote on that, Jenny?
Ginny votes yes.
Lee?
I vote yes.
All votes yes.
Randy?
Randy votes yes.
And
Dave.
Veach votes yes.
Okay, deliberations. Randy?
So, I think that the only thing that stuck out to me was the fact that there was a little bit more coverage, building coverage, and that it was a little bigger, but there's no way I could ever think this would be substantially more detrimental. It would not be possible, because really have gone to great measures to make it a building that fits perfectly in that spot, and you've made it more environmentally sound, and I think it's a great project, and I live near there, I'm looking forward to watching it grow, assuming that we approve it.
Paul?
Yes, it's a funny situation because it's not a house that you would ever get approved for building now. It's only there because it's historically been there. What's happened is that you're now making it more compliant with current regulations, which is a good idea. It's not gigantic. It's not a huge increase in coverage. And I did watch the Conservation Commission hearing. Their concerns, I think, were small compared with what it could have been. And I think overall, it's certainly not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood.
Lee?
I would agree. I think it's a beautiful location. It's very exposed, but the plan that you have come up with is very well thought out, and I love the removal from the V zone. I think it looks like a great project, and I agree with my colleagues.
Jenny?
Yeah, I do too. I don't have anything really more to add. I think they're all improvements, and I think that you've made really thoughtful changes and suggestions. The increases are really modest that you have here. I mean, even having to go up for FEMA, you're still over 2 feet from what the maximum is. So I think that they're modest improvements. I think that the conservation, I watched it also, they were approving of it. Historic was approving of it. Chris, you made a comment at the beginning of the hearing that it will appear bigger. That's what you said. I would add that I think it's also going to appear better. So I would approve it.
Dave Veach?
I agree with all previous, when I first looked at this and looked at the design, I just went, wow, you really nailed it, in terms of it belongs there. And this new design, in its reference to what's there and the improvements, everything, it's a perfect fit for the neighborhood and everything else. So congratulations. I'll support it.
Jay, I had, not specifically in relation to this, but criteria 12 hasn't come up in a long time. And I think I understand it, and the others do too, particularly Paul. Lateral doesn't necessarily mean this way. It could be this way or any way. Is that correct?
Any horizontal expansion, correct?
So that's really what that
Right.
means, yeah. Okay, thank you. Because we had that question the other day, I think. Okay, well, I'm not voting, but if I were, I would certainly approve it, because in no way is this substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood.
I will move to approve the application as submitted. I guess the question will be conditions, given the location. And I'm wondering what your plans are.
So the plans are, obviously, is to get as much done as we can before the parking lot, the beach opens. And they have no problems being able to keep their equipment that will be utilized during the summer on site, but they understand that there may be restrictions in terms of exterior summertime work. We can appreciate that. Off-season, they've spoken with town officials that doesn't seem to be a problem if a construction vehicle gets parked in the parking lot during the day or something when it was empty and not being used. So I think we can work that out, so. Maybe your standard restrictions, Paul, would be
Yep.
would fit here.
All right, I'll move to approve the application on the condition that all construction activity and vehicles shall be contained on-site or at a neighboring property with the permission of the property owner. I suppose that could include the town.
Could be the town.
And the parking lot.
Right.
That between June 30th and Labor Day, no exterior construction will be allowed. No work shall be permitted on the weekends, and construction activity would be between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. only.
Dave Veach, seconds. And I just almost point that the nearest abutter had actually referenced that as
Right, he
well,
did.
so.
Yep.
Correct.
Need a vote on that? Ginny?
Ginny votes yes.
Lee?
I vote yes.
All votes yes?
Randy votes yes.
And Veach votes yes.
That's a unanimous vote, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Wow.
23-113, please.
Application number 23-113, James Fox, care of William F. Riley Esquire, P.O. Box 707, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Owner of property located at 90 Seaview Street, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 15E, Block 72, Lot 5. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a non-conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot via the installation of a new foundation, relocation of the dwelling, and the construction of an addition. Also proposed is the replacement and installation of exterior mechanical system appliances. The existing dwelling is non-conforming and then is located 4 feet from the easterly abutter. The generator is and will remain non-conforming, and then it is located 3.8 feet from the easterly abutter. The existing AC condenser is non-conforming, and it is located 13.6 feet from the southerly abutter. The proposed dwelling will be non-conforming, and then it will be located 5.9 feet from the easterly abutter where a 15-foot setback is required. The proposed mechanical systems will be non-conforming, in that they will be located 12 feet from the southerly abutter where a 15-foot setback is required. The existing building coverage is 1,668 square feet, 16.8%, and the proposed building coverage is 1,966 square feet, 19.8%, where 15% is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 9,948 square feet, where 20,000 square feet is required in the R20 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Protective Bylaw.
Mr. Riley and Ms. Kempton.
Good afternoon, Bill Riley, on behalf of Jim and Gail Fox, who are participating remotely, and Karen Kempton was our designer. To introduce this project, I want to say, first of all, that the building that we're talking about was originally built in the late 1700s. It was a tavern over by the Triangle on what now be Training Field Road. And then it was moved to Seaview Street back in the 1830s. They wanted to be closer to town. And so and that was in the Rogers family. And it remained in the Rogers family from that time until it was sold to Mark Abraham, the previous owner, in the 1980s. In fact, Paul Rogers, who is the great-great-grandson of Flavius, Rogers, has the house immediately to the rear, which is the abutter of this property. And so Mark Abraham had made changes to the property, and the Foxes would like to make some changes which they think are in keeping with the historic nature of the structure. So we've been to the Historic Commission, and what we're doing to the historic portion of the building is we're adding a front dormer and a rear dormer. Mr. Fox is 6'4", and he can't stand up in the shower because there's only 5 feet of headroom in the shower. So those are the main changes. There is an addition going on in the back of Mark Abraham had added an addition on the back, so we're adding a small one. We want to move the building closer to the street, so it's more in line with the other homes on the street, and that will enable us to separate the building from the garage. So we'll, I think, do a better job of maintaining its identity as an antique. And so the Foxes take their responsibilities with regard to the antique nature of the structure very seriously. They are doing a small addition. I point out that the addition they're adding does meet the setbacks, both east and west here. So I'm going to ask Karen to explain the goals that the Foxes have regarding the design and how she accomplished them. Karen?
Good afternoon, Karen Kempton, architect for Jim and Gail Fox. So this existing historic house was built in the late 1700s and has been meticulously cared for by Jim and Gail. An addition was done in the rear in 1984 and a 2-car garage was added. And then later, a 2-story exterior deck structure was added to connect these structures. Jim and Gail would like to demolish this exterior deck, I think that's on that photo you just saw, and add a 16 by 16 foot addition to the rear of the L to give them a larger living room family gathering space. The addition will also have a side entrance to the detached garage for mudroom, powder room, and first floor laundry room space, which doesn't exist now. Presently, there is a long driveway from Seaview Street to the garage with no parking space near the front door, which sadly never gets used because there's no place to park next to the front door. We propose to lift the historic home, which is sinking into the ground, and move it closer to Seaview, in line with the other homes along Seaview. This accomplishes a better separation between the historic home and the more modern garage, as Bill mentioned, as well as to provide the family some additional private backyard space. The house will be 26 feet back from the front property line and 35 feet back from the edge of pavement. As it will become more prominent to the street and more inviting, it will match the setbacks of the adjacent homes. The new addition at the rear will meet all setback requirements. The historic house will continue to be non-conforming on the left side, but we will be moving it 2 feet further back. We believe it is important to keep a portion of the existing driveway for guests to park and actually use the front door. The remainder of the existing driveway will be removed to allow for some family outdoor play space. The rear addition of the 16 by 16 foot addition, or 256 square feet, is a modest addition which continues the rear roof line of the L, so no higher than what is there now, basically just an extension of that existing roof line. This does increase the building coverage by the addition, but we feel it is an attractive solution to giving the family more living space without detracting from the beauty of the historic Cape. We feel that this addition is not detrimental to the neighborhood, as it is located in the rear of the historic home. And this addition allows the family to maintain the historic home for the enjoyment of the neighborhood while enjoying themselves more living space for them in future generations.
Thank you, Karen. Would you tell the board members what the existing floor area of both the first and second floor is, so they have some idea how modest the structure is?
So the existing first floor is 1,044 square feet, and we are adding 256 square feet for a total of 1,300 square feet on the first floor. These numbers are on sheet A3. The second floor is existing 1,900 square feet. Again, we're adding that 16 by 16 piece of 256 square feet. So the total finished space on the second floor would be 1,265. So a very modest home and a very modest addition.
Thank you, Karen. So run through the criteria for you. So adequacy of the size of the site in terms of the size of the proposed use. Although our lot is modest in size, we're only adding 360 square feet of building coverage for a total of 1,405 square feet. The building coverage of the garage has not changed. The existing sideline setbacks will remain pretty much the same. The applicant would like to move, as we indicated, move the building towards the street, where it would be 26 feet, where 25 feet is required. Also want to point out that the roof of our structure is not going up at all, and we're actually over 8 feet below the maximum ridge height that would be allowed on this structure based on the average grade plane. Compatibility of the size of the proposed structure with neighboring properties. I've burned out my calculator today, calculating gross floor area. And you can see ours is number 90. Our existing gross floor area, based on the numbers Karen provided, is 2,053 square feet. And our proposed is 3,785 square feet. That's because we're adding a full basement of 1,140 square feet.
Gross floor area?
The gross floor area of the basement.
We're adding 256,
No, the gross floor area of the basement.
is 1,300 square feet.
Yeah, so of the 1,300 square feet is the basement. And as you can see, there are modest homes in the neighborhood, and they're at the top of the street, at the bottom of the street, there are larger homes, more recently homes. So we think that we are compatible in terms of size of the neighboring structures. The extent of the proposed increase in non-conforming nature, again, it's like a Branford issue where, we're increasing the living area on a non-conforming lot, and that's considered intensification of a non-conformity. Suitability of the site, including but not limited to impact on neighboring properties or on the natural environment, including slopes, vegetation, wetlands, groundwater, water bodies, and stormwater runoff. So here, if you've been to the site, it's very level. There's a slight slope from east to west, let's say down Seaview Street towards town. It's 1 foot lower than it is on the uphill side. So we don't think that stormwater runoff is going to be a serious problem either on the adjacent way or on the abutting properties. Impact of scale, siding, and mass on a neighborhood visual character. I think it's safe to say that the neighborhood visual character really depends on the way the building faces Seaview Street. And so the change we've made, which has been supported by the Historic Commission, is all we did was a dormer on the front, which Karen has set in from either side substantially. So it's about as modest a change as you can make. And it's the kind of change that would have been made, back in the 1800s or the early 1900s. adding a dormer to give them a little more headroom upstairs. And so I think that is the streetscape that our bylaw is intended to protect. And I think the Foxes in their design with Karen really achieved that goal. There are no views or vistas, so I think, the neighborhood visual character will remain substantially the same. Removing the ugly second floor deck and porch will actually improve the view from Seaview Terrace. So I think that it's safe for us to suggest to you that these changes are not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing structure. Compatibility of the proposed use with neighboring uses. It's a single-family neighborhood, and of course, this is a single-family building and will remain that way. Method of sewage disposal, source of water and drainage. So the properties on the municipal sewer system and the municipal water system. The impact on traffic flow and safety. We do not anticipate there will be any negative change in that regard. And noise and litter, we think there'll be no change. Adequacy of utilities and other public services, they are adequate, and there's no change there. And 11 and 12 are not applicable in our case, so thank you very much.
Is there anyone here today or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak in favor of this application? If so, please indicate you'd like to join the discussion.
I don't see anyone to speak in favor.
And I'll read the correspondence. The first is from Judith Giorgio, our health agent. She writes on 12/12, I've reviewed the requested additions and renovations. The property is connected to town sewer. The plan does not add sewer flow to the property and is acceptable. I have no concerns. Christina Bassett writes for the Historical Commission. She says, she writes on December 6th, on November 21st, the CHC found the home at 90 Seaview Street to be historically significant, but did not impose any demolition delay. And then we have a letter. This is from Elizabeth Daly. She's at 107 Seaview Street. She writes on December 12th, my name is Elizabeth Daly and I reside at 107 Seaview. I'm writing to express my support. I have seen the plans and I think this is a reasonable request and not detrimental to the neighborhood. The proposed changes seem very appropriate in both style and scale. The room addition as well as the dormer additions blend beautifully with the existing home and are consistent with the existing home's architecture. I support the Foxes' effort to enhance their property and improve their home's functionality while keeping with appropriate historical architecture. I'm in full support of the project moving forward with the ZBA, and I thank you for your attention and your efforts. And that is the extent of the correspondence. Is there anyone here today on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak either against this application or has a specific question? If so, please indicate you'd like to join the meeting. There's a lady in the third row. If you'd like to go to the microphone, please. Please tell us who you are, and then the floor is yours.
My name is Donna Rhodes. I live at 91 Seaview Street, directly across the street. I don't think dormers are consistent with the age of this house. I think they're detrimental. If you compare to the house, I think it's 101, which is toward the ocean from the house that I live in. It's about the same age. It doesn't have dormers on it. And I don't think the dormers should be permitted. Also, I don't see any reason to move this house closer to the street. And there was a comment that there's enough parking area there. People park on the front lawn now of that house and that property. I've seen it through the summer. And there really isn't much parking except on Seaview Street. The driveway is going to be under a lot of construction area if they're putting in a new foundation. There's a private It's not Highland, but it's Seaview Terrace, I believe. Runs along the side of this property. That's a private road. There's a high hedge there that blocks the view from that street, but so I don't think it's going to look worse to the neighborhood because the back addition is it's awkward. What they put on the back, probably in 1984 or after. I think there was some construction, must have been taking place after the 90s when they connected that deck or put an addition or changed the garage. The garage area has an upstairs bedroom to it that's connected by that upper deck. So that's an awkward space that's there now. Seaview Street, these jobs never finish on time on Seaview Street, or two of the existing 3 properties that are
Excuse
there
me,
now.
you're drifting a little bit away from the point. You should be
Okay.
speaking about what the application has presented, not things.
How
of that
long is
nature.
this construction supposed to take place? When's it supposed to be finished? And when would the proposed starting time be? Foundations can get you in a bit of trouble, I think, because don't you have to have certain temperatures before you can pour concrete? Above 50 degrees or something like that for concrete?
Oh, you're starting to ask a bunch of questions. Please finish your comments, and then perhaps Mr. Riley can answer some of your questions that you brought up.
Well, okay, I have a comment on the back structure. The back of this where they put the last addition on and put the deck, that's a really I've been inside this house. That's kind of an awkward space because there's a chimney currently in that space. So that takes up a lot of the floor space on the inside. Getting rid of that probably is beneficial to the property. They're putting on a fake chimney on top so that it stays with the outside character of the house, apparently. So basically, those are my.
Thank you very much. Mr. Riley, a rebuttal on some of the latest comments, or perhaps some answers about construction. I'm sure you're not a concrete expert, so you don't need to answer that one.
I know that you're not supposed to pour concrete below freezing, I know that. Other than that, I'm sort of out of space. The interior chimney is being removed. The Historic Commission likes to have, if there was a chimney on the antique, they want to keep a chimney on the antique. So we routinely put a faux chimney to replace the original, but it's going to look real. I agree with the lady that, the additions that were added in the mid-'80s, the decking and the screening is very unattractive. And so we're happy to remove that. The whole idea being we're separating the antique as much as we can from the garage. Other than that, I think that moving the building closer to the street is going to actually make the street more attractive, improve the streetscape. So, thank you.
Karen, her first point had to do with the dormers being out of place and all that. Could you speak to that, please?
Well, historically, over time, half capes, three-quarter capes, full capes did have dormers added on the second floor to give a growing family headroom on the second floor. Right now, as Bill mentioned, there's an upstairs shower that's only 5 feet high, and the front wall of the house is probably only 12 inches, and in one of the bedrooms, there's not sufficient space or headroom to be, it's 7, I think it's 7.1, so it's under what's allowed for a bedroom. So adding the dormer in the front allows us to have full headroom for those both bedrooms on the front.
Thank you. Okay, questions from the board. Paul? I'm sorry. Forgive me for not recognizing you. Yes, could you step up there? Was there anybody on Microsoft Teams? Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Christopher Senni. I'm an attorney. I live in Brewster, and I have a small land use practice. I represent Juro Mackay, who lives at 18 Seaview, and I would like to ask that the site plan be put up on the screen so I can address a few issues on the site plan, if that's possible. Thank you. This is my client's home, and Mr. Mackay is here in the chamber with us today. And first, I'll start by saying that we agree that the proposed changes would not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. They do seem to be modest, and they do seem to fit fairly well within the neighborhood. So my client is not opposed to the renovation project in any respect. However, there are some site issues related to this private road, Seaview Terrace. This was installed years ago as part of a development scheme that did not include either 90 Seaview Street or 94 Seaview Street, which is here. And both of these homes have an address of Seaview Street, not Seaview Terrace. And that's because in the history of these parcels, there was never common ownership or a common scheme of development with the owner of Seaview Terrace. And actually, the owner of the fee interest in this road, meaning the real estate itself, is my client. He owns all the way up to Seaview Street and back down all the way along his property to where his property comes to an end. Now, his ownership is very much subject to the rights that others have to use this private way. So he could not use the real estate that he owns in any way that would interfere with the rights that others have to use the way. However, these two parcels are not among the parcels whose have that right. Their deed does not include any rights to use Seaview Terrace. 90 Seaview Street has its own access from the street. 94 does not. When 94 was originally carved out as a lot, there was a very tiny dog leg that goes on the other side of 90 Seaview Street, and that provided road frontage for this home at 94 Seaview Street. That was never used as a road. But because there was common ownership between these two properties, when this was created, this back lot was created, an easement was recorded on the land records allowing the owner of 94 Seaview Street to use this driveway on 90 Seaview Street for access. And that is the legal access that the back lot has, not Seaview Terrace. The condition that exists today is that there are driveways that come in off of Seaview Terrace. And in fact, the owner of the subject property has a pretty tight turn here to come in this driveway and turn into the garage. And so typically, the owner of 90 Seaview Street has used Seaview Terrace and come in this way, which makes it an easier shot into the garage. But there is no legal right to do so. And similarly, the owner of 94 Seaview Street has used a driveway here to access, not using the deeded easement, but access his home by way of Seaview Terrace. All of this is informal. We don't know how far back this goes. We don't know if prescriptive rights have accrued. That takes 20 years of consistent, open, hostile, adverse use of someone else's property to accomplish a prescriptive right to use an easement, and one must go to court to perfect that right by filing a claim that I have acquired a prescriptive easement. So I don't know those facts. I do not know how long. Also, such use, in order to be able to accrue to a property owner, must be without permission. Another way of saying that is it must be adverse. And we do not know if property owners in this neighborhood gave permission for those driveways. This plan assumes curb cuts and landscaping that actually is sited within Seaview Terrace. There have been discussions recently with this owner and my client about an easement that would be granted to allow this. But there is no easement that has been granted. And so this site plan is assuming that continuing to do what has been done, whether there's a legal basis or not, is okay. And I'm not sure that it is. The plan calls for putting a patio on part of this existing paved driveway, but that will be extinguishing the deeded easement rights to 94 Seaview Street. So there is a lot to be straightened out here. Again, my client does not oppose the project itself, but we would like an opportunity to meet with Bill and his clients and sit down and talk about the title issues and the relative legal land rights that the different parcels have, so that we can come back to your board at a time when we have ironed this out and are in agreement on how are we going to handle this. Now, this does have practical impacts on my client. It is very hard for him to turn out of his driveway onto Seaview Terrace, which again, he owns the fee of, given certain existing piles of dirt and landscaping that has been done both on 90 and 94. So this has a practical implication that we would like an opportunity to sit down and discuss with the applicant. So my request, and I'm hoping Attorney Riley would agree to this, would be to continue this hearing so that we have the opportunity to go over the title issues and get clarity here and maybe even achieve a recorded easement. But what would happen if this easement goes away is that the owner at 94 Seaview Street has no choice but to use Seaview Avenue, and that impacts my client considerably. So we are just looking for an opportunity. We're suggesting a continuance so that we might sit down with Bill and his clients. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Riley, did you want to respond to that at all? First of all, I should say, is there anybody else that wishes to speak against this application?
Thank you. The Chris's description of, the legal rights or the legal ownership rights was accurate. His client does own the fee in the way. But I know there were discussions between my client and Chris's client that were not fruitful. And so my client decided to proceed. We don't think rights in Seaview Terrace are really relevant to the zoning board regarding the design, particularly since Chris's client has no objection and agrees that the changes are an improvement. So the back house, you want to put this, site plan up again? Okay, so 91 is here, and that's owned by Paul Rogers. And during Mark Abraham's ownership, 91 had always used Seaview Terrace or the driveway for 90 Seaview Street for access. What Mark Abraham did for Paul Rogers was take this portion gotta follow the line, this portion of 90 Seaview and separated it from the front piece and granted it to Paul. So Paul would have a driveway out to Seaview Terrace. That was done back in the 80s. And so, and Paul Rogers, will have his own claim regarding the right to use Seaview Terrace, but clearly it's been going on for much longer than 20 years. This garage that is being used by 90 Seaview through a driveway here out to Seaview Terrace was constructed back in the 1980s also, and has been used clearly for more than 20 years. So, I'm happy to sit down and discuss this with Chris, but we don't think we should have to postpone this and take more of your time to discuss a legal issue that's really not related to the changes on 90 Seaview.
Okay, thank you. Questions? You already had an opportunity to speak.
That's not fair.
Excuse me. No interruption.
I just would like to know what.
No, I'm sorry, you cannot speak unless you're at the microphone. Do you understand? Now, that gentleman behind you, did you want to join this conversation?
Not at this time, but she has a right to speak.
No, she does not.
More information has been given.
Okay, any more from you, and I will have you removed, all right? Do you understand me?
Oh, that's not right.
Do you understand me?
I understand you.
Yes, I understand you. Very.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Paul?
Do I understand that the project involves a separation between the new addition and the garage so that, in effect, hobgoblin of connections that are currently there will no longer be there?
That's correct. We're moving the house further away. We're getting rid of all that, the extra deck and screening. And the new addition is much shorter. So there will be a much more substantial space, open space, between the antique and the garage.
Okay. And did the Historic Commission have a comment of any kind with respect to the dormer that's being added?
They felt it was appropriate because they made the point that throughout time, this was what was done historically to these homes when families grew.
Okay.
And they also appreciated the fact that Karen had stepped them in substantially from the side, so that it wasn't like the entire roof was being lifted up, just a small portion of it.
Correct. Now, this anticipates that the access that your client would have to his garage will no longer be along the driveway that currently exists. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct. I think, with regard to Chris's concerns, I mean, whether somebody has acquired adverse rights is a question of fact, generally. And and you can allege you have acquired those rights, but the only way to actually acquire those rights is through a court decision. So nobody that's owned this property has sought to have a determination that they do have rights. Currently, we don't have rights, and my understanding from my client that his discussions with Chris's clients were unfruitful, and so there was a refusal to grant the easement, so we don't have rights. But we might have acquired rights, and they intend to continue exercising what they have, and if we can't work out a resolution, then would have to go to court to work it out. But I'm happy to sit down with Chris, happy to discuss it with him and his client, as I know my client would. Mr. Fox is also a lawyer. There's never too many lawyers, right, Paul? And be happy to sit down and discuss the issue. We just don't think it's fair to hold up this project based on that issue.
Well, in effect, you're asking us to recognize or to adopt a site plan which would eliminate that driveway access.
Well,
Is that right?
well, in the first place, that's their current plan.
Right.
But it's really not an issue that's really before the zoning board, because whether we shut that driveway off or not is not really a zoning issue. I mean, ideally, they'd like to shut it off and use it just for parking. But, depending on how our conversations go, they may not shut it off. So
Well,
it's,
isn't the impact on traffic and safety one of the issues that we consider?
well, I know, but I think the impact on traffic flow and safety has to do with, are we increasing traffic? And we're not, whether it goes out through the driveway, which it has done for many, many years, or it goes out through Seaview Terrace, which it's also done for many, many years, things aren't going to change. So, I mean, if we resolve our issues with Chris's client, we may well shorten the driveway, as long as it's satisfactory to them. But, if we don't, then we'll leave the driveway as it is.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Lee?
Thank you. I don't have any questions right now.
Ginny?
Okay, let me start with the question about the house. One question I had before we got into the driveway, and I want to circle back to that, is the proposed mechanicals. In the advertisement, it refers to mechanicals being moved. It says the proposed mechanical systems will be located 12 feet from the southerly abutter. It doesn't specify that that's only the AC unit. I know up above, it says that the generator is going to remain where it currently is, which is 3.8 feet from the other abutter, the
Right.
easterly abutter. So my question was, can you reconcile that, and could there be a way that the generator is improved? Instead of staying where it is at 3.8, could it move over to the 12 feet where the other mechanical is going?
You mean behind the garage? Move the generator behind the garage?
Well, wherever wherever it says that mechanicals are going, it says mechanicals, but it's really only the AC unit, correct?
Ginny, behind the garage is where they are, 13.6 is the AC.
Yep.
It doesn't call out what mechanical it is, it just says proposed mechanicals.
Right, and so maybe I wasn't that clear. In the earlier part of the ad, it says that the generator is going to remain where it is, which is 3.8 feet from the easterly abutter. So my question is, are you talking only about the AC unit at the 13.6, or are you also going to move the generator?
We're planning on moving the generator.
Okay.
The reason, first of all, the reason the generator is there is that when it was built,
Yeah.
when it was located there was no limitation in terms of setback. The other thing is that it would cost, I don't know, the last time we were here, we talked about moving a generator. There's a number like $10,000 or $15,000 for the wiring and moving costs, and so we'd prefer to leave it as it is. So where the generator is located, there is the 8 or 9 foot wide strip that belongs to Paul Rogers, his nominal frontage on Seaview. The next property over is owned by the Kimballs, and it's their driveway. And so the reality is that there's no house within 25 feet of the generator. And so we prefer to leave it as it is because we think effectively, it meets the setback. It's greater than 15 feet, which would be the setback in this area.
Right. I was only asking because it says the generator is and will remain non-conforming. That's what it says at 3.8. Then later on, it says the proposed mechanical systems, plural, will be improved, if you will, to the 12-foot location. And I just wanted to clarify, did that include the generator? Because it didn't sound like it did, and you just confirmed that it wouldn't. The
Right.
generator will stay where it is.
Yes.
Okay, so my question was, could it move to be an improvement to the nonconformity, but you said that they'd prefer not to.
Right, because there's a significant cost involved.
Okay, so that's the question there.
And effectively, it's more than 15 feet from any residence.
I understand they don't have to move it, I just wanted to ask if they
Well,
could.
I know, but the question is, the reason why we have a setback there is there was a gentleman off Shore Road who had a big house and put in big air conditioners and generators, put them right on his property line, where they were about 20 feet away from the neighbor's house. And as a result of that, the town passed a bylaw that said, they wanted these units to meet the setback, so they wouldn't be close to the neighbor's house. So the point I was making is that because of the layout of this land, we have 2 driveways before you get to a house. So the generator is effectively more than 15 feet from the closest house.
Okay, no, that's helpful. I mean, that's not evident on the site plan, so thank
Right.
you for clarifying that. And then, so mechanicals, plural, is really just the AC unit.
I assume so.
Okay.
They don't consult with me on that stuff.
Okay, just was looking for, given that there's a substantial project underway, lifting the house, moving it, it just seemed like maybe that could be an improvement. But, so getting back to the driveways, I will definitely defer to Paul and the others on the board about that, because I'm not familiar with that whole legal process. But I respect that it's been brought up by Mr. Senni and representing the neighbor. I do agree with Paul, though, that I'm a little uncomfortable. I want to hear what the rest of my colleagues say. Approving the project and just limiting it to the house and not the driveway situation, it's a little question, I have a question about that. Because I do notice on the site plan, it has proposed patio, it has proposed retaining wall, which without the benefit of today's explanation, we would have no way of knowing that, but it does effectively cut that off. And it doesn't say anywhere, unless I'm not seeing it, that the driveway is being reoriented. I didn't realize that when I went to the site visit. We approached the house and the property when we looked at it from Seaview Street. We didn't even notice that this was really, that part of the overall proposal, I'll say I didn't notice, I won't speak for everyone, and it doesn't say on the site plan, relocating driveway entrance unless I'm missing it. So
Well, no, the driveway entrance already exists.
back here on the back? Okay, all right. So what's new is really cutting off that access from the long part of the driveway from Seaview Street to go back to the garage.
Right, and that's, again, that's not something we have to come to the
Understood.
zoning board.
That's-
And, now that Mr. Senni's raised the issue,
Yeah,
we won't be making any changes until we resolve them with Mr. Senni and his client.
yeah, okay, that's all I had.
Dave?
Yeah, that's, we can't wait to hear from some more attorneys on all this, but, I just have one thing, Karen, I'm not sure if there's this, a discrepancy on the plan. I'm looking at the rear, the second floor, of the proposed addition, and, when I look at the rear elevation, you're showing, some, let's call them some eave trim or rakes or something for the steeper pitched roof. And then, and then showing the dormers are a little bit shallower pitch there. But when I look at the side elevations, it doesn't, those don't seem to coordinate with that rear elevation in what I'm seeing.
That steeped gable, is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
I'm not,
That's applied
I don't
trim.
see a line representing that steep gable on the side elevations.
It's applied trim on that
So
side.
so you're gonna apply it to the wall, and it's not gonna project?
No, it's exactly what's there now.
It is there, that's what's there now?
Yep.
Okay. All right, great, thanks.
Randy?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I just want to go back to something that Ginny noted, because I felt the same way about the generator and the AC condenser. I thought that it would be better if they were together. So I'm disappointed that they won't be. I'm not sure how much that really costs to do that, but you make it sound like that's a huge burden. So that was one thing I did notice.
Just speak up a little, please.
Yeah, sure. So, did you hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm disappointed that the mechanicals can't be together in a less burdensome area, because there's more space on this, I think it's the south side. And I think it makes sense to put them together over there than to burden that other spot only 3.8 feet away. So, you answered that, so I just wanted to bring it up again. And when it comes to the driveway, I have a question for the fellow that lives on Seaview Terrace, if I could. We're allowed to bring people in?
Sure.
Yeah? You have to go to the mic, sir. So I'll warm up with a question about the addition. You made it sound through your attorney that you were comfortable with that.
Absolutely, yes. I
And-
don't have any
okay.
objection to
Excuse me, could
the...
you just identify yourself, please?
Oh, okay. My
Yeah.
name is Jerome McKay, resident and owner at 18 Seaview Terrace,
Right, Seaview Terrace.
with emphasis on terrace.
Yeah, and so you're comfortable with that, so you don't see it as overcrowding of that area?
No.
Okay, great. And then when it comes to Seaview Terrace, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to assume that the public has a right of access to Seaview Terrace.
No, the public does not, but there are some easements that exist on residents of Library Lane, which is the corner.
Are you
And-
sure the public doesn't have a right of access? So if I drunk drive down Seaview Terrace, I'm not going to get arrested because that's one of the elements. So I think, I do
is-
think the public has a right of access.
If you
but-
go to the Registry of Deeds and look at my lot, it's actually, I do own the fee to that terrace up until the southerly extent of my property line, which coincides with the bushes.
So if you wanted to, you could put cones there and say, nobody comes down here?
No, because I still need to provide access to those who do have actual deeded easements.
And who would that be?
There are a number of neighbors that do.
Okay.
I would have to,
Okay.
I'd have to give you a list.
Okay.
And not all, but, obviously I do not block it. And I have given permission in writing to Mr. Fox and Mr. Rogers, revocable, friendly, neighborly permission. So it's not an adverse use.
I see. Okay, that's all I have.
Could I possibly make one comment that kind of came up with Mr. Semple? The issue that I have really is the assumption that the plot can put in structures that create exclusive use of the opening to my property for this access to their garage. There's no other way for them to access it, right? So the road is 16.13 feet wide. And I have been researching on whether it's even legal to be two-way. There are residents who stroll there with their dogs. Large trucks like to cut through there to avoid Main Street. And, I've had long discussions with my insurance company on liability. And if I could reduce well, first of all, the assumption that it could be claimed as exclusive use by adding a structure that's approved by the ZBA is the reason I'm here. That wasn't there, I'd say, wow, that house is going to look great, good for you. The other thing is that the road, there are traffic safety concerns. I've had discussions with the lieutenant down at the police department, and yeah, there are traffic concerns. I can only imagine what it would be if it was approved as is. I would love to reach a equitable and fair, reasonable agreement. Thank you.
Just one comment. So perhaps if Chris had contacted me before today's hearing, in fact, maybe like noon today, so we could have talked about it before the hearing. But, you know, to come to the hearing without having previously discussed it, you know, we'll sit down and meet with them. There won't be any change in the driveway until we have a resolution of the issue. So I believe it's fair for the Foxes to get a decision on the proposed changes to the building and let the legal issues between Chris's client and my client be handled in another area, either privately or through a court system. I hope, hopefully, it's always been cordial. We ought to be able to work it out, but I don't think it should stop this decision.
Dave, I have one more question, if you would. So, just to clarify for me what's on the ground, because I don't remember from when I was out there, and I wasn't looking at it in this regard. But the plan does show proposed drive expansion, buttressed with a retaining wall not to exceed 3 feet in height. And the plan also shows some, I don't know if it's retaining wall existing or not in the back edge of the driveway there. You know, because it seems to me as a practical matter, to put a 3-foot retaining wall as shown on the plan there, it pretty much definitely cuts off access from that rear lot on the using the existing drive.
There is an existing retaining wall. In fact, if you bring up that picture, I think, on the side, the existing retaining wall is right off the corner of the garage. I think it shows on that photograph. What we are hoping to do is to pull that back so that there is more room when you pull out of the driveway to turn before you get on Seaview Street. See, well, the ladder's kind of hiding it, but there's a wall there, timber wall.
Yeah, you can see there's a change of grade there.
So we're pushing that further back so that when you come out of the garage, you can turn without having to turn onto Seaview Terrace, which is what they're doing now. So in my mind, it's almost safer to create that extended parking area as you're coming out of the garage.
Okay.
Again, I think the driveway is something that belongs in a different forum. So, you know, we won't make any changes until we have that resolved. But we think that our building design is a good design, the neighbors like it, and we think it should be approved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask the board members just a question, and each, I'll just go around. Before we go on to deliberations, are you concerned about the driveways and all that sort of thing, to the extent that you would want to see this continued? Or are you comfortable with Mr. Riley's argument that that really is separate and we should go ahead with the application as presented? So I'm looking for a simple answer here so that we could recommend to Mr. Riley or not and go forward. So I'll start with Jenny. Jenny?
I'm comfortable with excluding the driveway situation, including, I'm comfortable with just looking at the house.
Lee?
Yeah, I am too. I think since the driveway's already there, it can be used just as it is without using Seaview Terrace. So yes, I'm comfortable with
Paul?
looking at the structure.
Well, I could agree that it makes sense to resolve the driveway situation if possible, but And as I understand it, from what Mr. Riley is saying, he agrees that they do not have legal access on Seaview Terrace absent a sustained claim for adverse possession, which would be necessary to legalize the entranceway from the driveway, from Seaview Terrace to the garage. So I have some hesitation in saying that we should approve the plan which does not comport with what he suggests is, in fact, their legal right currently. What they do have the ability to do is to use the driveway and leave it that way, and not exit and entrance the garage from Seaview Terrace. And if he did all of that, presumably, the plan could go forward as proposed. So it seems to me that, given that he's represented, that they will try to work out what they can do. And if not, presumably litigation will resolve it. I think we could probably go ahead and deal with the house.
Randy?
Well, I live by, if you're not sure what to do, don't do anything. So I would be perfectly comfortable with a continuance, because I have faith in Mr. Riley that he will figure this out, and then everybody will come back happy. So I would prefer to wait.
Dave Veach?
I think I'm in agreement with Randy on that. I mean, I think if were we to go forward, and I don't have a problem with what's proposed with the house or anything, but I think, were we to try to go ahead today, I think what Paul's suggesting, we would have to condition our approval on that the access only be through, on the driveway, and if during the construction process and everything else. And that's the only way we could go forward today. I think I would be more comfortable seeking a continuance or a withdrawal without prejudice.
So, Mr. Riley, if I call for a vote, a supermajority would not be in favor of going ahead.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm completely stunned that you would take something that is not relevant necessarily. I told you we won't change the driveway until the issues with Mr. Senni are resolved. Mr. Senni shows up today, could have called yesterday, could have called this morning, and did not. And then he comes in here, raises the issue, and this is the way the property has been used for decades. Decades. And so all we want to do is continue the way we use it. You don't have to reference the driveway at all. If he wants to submit a new plan that shows the driveway not being changed, we'll do that. But to delay the project, I don't know how long Mr. Senni's client has been the owner, but these things can take years to resolve. And this property has been used this way for decades. That garage was built in the 80s. Paul Rogers' property has been using this Seaview Terrace for access since the 80s. So I would ask you to reconsider your position, Randy and David, so we can get what is a good project underway, rather than forcing us to negotiate while being held hostage to what is an otherwise good plan. So I think you should let the driveway issue resolve itself outside of the zoning board.
So I would say to Randy and Dave, I don't think what you're saying is you want this continued forever. You could simply, grant an extension of a month or two, whatever Sarah says.
Well, then we lose the whole year of construction.
So that I know.
I can, as Mr. Riley is framing it, and as long as we're staying within the bounds, I understand what he's saying about, ultimately, this is not a zoning board issue. I mean, our issue here is the building primarily, and so I am willing to reconsider in terms of saying that I can allow the construction to go forward, at least with respect to what's on the record is being said here. If that's enough, I don't know. Or we condition that, the driveway is not to change from its present condition until, or whatever, I don't know. I'm just saying that, this is a plan that we're supposed to sign and accept, and it shows the proposed patio, and it shows, a retaining wall that definitely, limits access to the back lot there. So there's these things, they aren't ours, and I do understand, I don't want to hold up. I think the project is a good construction project. I think the proposal is a good proposal. I think moving the house forward is a good proposal, all of those things. So I can support that. I'm just confused by all the rest of this, and I understand, and I don't really want to hold up the project for, Bill says it could be a year. While those things get resolved, we're not going to have much say over how those access things get resolved. But that may definitely have some bearing on what's shown on this plan that we are supposed to be approving.
Randy?
So I totally agree with you, Mr. Riley, that coming in the last 12th hour is really bad practice. And it's disappointing to see that happen. I noticed it right away, and that was my first impulse. However, I wasn't talking about years or anything. I was just thinking about January, for you to come back and just tell us what's happened and see. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, so here's the difficulty from our perspective. And again, I haven't spoken with Chris, so I really don't know. But, they've been, as the gentleman indicated, there've been conversations between the parties. By holding this up, you change our relative positions so that we're now, oh no, we can't do anything unless we make a deal with him, so he has leverage that we don't have anymore. And that's why I honestly think you should simply vote on the project, and Chris and I will try to work it out, and if we can't, we'll end up in court. But it should not be a consideration for you as long as you know that this is a situation that's gone on for decades. And nothing that you're doing today, even using the modified plan, is going to change.
Jenny, Lee, and Paul, do you have any reason to change your minds?
I don't have any reason to change my mind. As I said, I think we can go forward with the building. What I anticipate would then happen would be that to the extent they are not able to work out their arrangements, one or the other parties will go to court to try and resolve what they think is the appropriate access. I don't see any reason why we can't go forward with the house itself.
Okay. Lee, Jenny?
I agree. I have no reason to change my mind.
Okay. All right. So back to what we were doing. So we're on to deliberations. Paul?
Why don't we move to close the hearing and move into deliberation?
And Dave each seconds.
Need a vote on that?
Jenny votes yes.
Lee?
I vote yes.
All votes yes.
Randy votes yes.
And Veach votes yes.
Okay, deliberations. Lee?
Well, I'm in favor of this project. I think it's a very good project. I think that it's modest. Seaview Street has been through a lot in the last few years, and I think this is a very appropriate project. I don't know if we can put in the conditions, something about the driveway, but I am in favor of this.
Jenny?
Okay, driveway notwithstanding, and I do think we need to put something in here that references that this plan that we looked at, that presumably we approve when we vote on this application, is proposed patio, the driveway, that needs to be noted, I think. That's, so driveway aside, the project that was proposed. I did watch the conservation hearing. They did talk about the dormer. I believe the chairman didn't originally like it, but then it was discussed among the board that it was very much in keeping with what a traditional historic house would evolve to. I think it's a track personally, so with all due respect to the neighbor, I don't think that should impact that piece. I think that the comments that the neighbor did make about the awkwardness of the back, and that is an older addition, it's not historic, and you can't see it. I think what's being proposed is an improvement to that. So I think that it's overall, I like the proposed plans. I think that moving the house, it is an old home, 1800, and it's on a rocky or unstable, you mentioned foundation. So the fact that you're moving it and improving the foundation is improving the longevity of this historic house. So I'm in favor of that in general for that reason. And then on top of it, it's an attractive design. I think it's an attractive solution. That actually, Karen, that was your words. I agree with that. And I would agree that Mr. Riley, in my opinion, he met all of our criteria in what he outlined. So I would support it.
Dave?
Yeah, well, I think I've probably said most of my, I will support this. I think that, that moving, the proposal to move the house closer to the street, I think fits into the neighborhood in a better way than it currently existing. I think that the dormer, especially the front dormer, is very much in keeping with the evolution of houses on the Cape, and it looks good, and the proposed addition is modest. I think separating the structure from the garage, the way that it currently is, going to be a big improvement. You know, it'd have some empty, the space in between there, instead of that deck and whatever all is up there. So I think all of that is an improvement, and it's, you know, it's certainly not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. And it meets our other criteria, and it may well be that just our standard, all vehicles, et cetera, to be kept on site may be enough to satisfy the legal issues that are going on here, at least from our concern, I don't know. But I will absolutely support it, thanks.
Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I came in thinking it might be a little overcrowded to add volume to that area, but I appreciate your presentation, and I have to agree with all my colleagues, and I think it's a great project. I always thought the front looks excellent, what you plan to do, and the streetscape, and so I support it. I just was disappointed to see any kind of controversy at the 12th hour, and I'm going to be on record wanting about that.
Paul?
Yes, I agree. I think that the fact that the dormer was approved by historic, and it seems consistent from what we hear from the architect with what was period. And the fact that you're eliminating all of that, as I put it, hobgoblin of stuff between the house and the garage currently, which I had difficulty figuring out when I was looking at it, figuring out exactly what the heck that was supposed to be doing, is going to clean up the neighborhood look, and it's going to make it look better. I think that our standard conditions can be used to deal with, at least on a temporary basis, the question of whether or not access to Seaview Terrace is available or not, and that will be resolved either by negotiation or by litigation. And if it's necessary for them to come back and deal with the question of the driveway, then the applicant can end up coming back to us to deal with it. But the proposed patio is the only thing that really interrupts the use of the driveway, and they don't have to put a patio in. So I think on the basis of that, it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, and I would approve it.
Yeah, from my standpoint, the only thing that bothered me was the fact it was going from 16.8 to 19.8, but overall, it is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. Well,
I'll move to approve the application as submitted with the condition that all construction activity and vehicles would be contained on site or at a neighboring property with the permission of the property owner, that between June 30th and Labor Day, there would be no exterior construction allowed. No work shall be permitted on the weekends, and construction activity would be between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. only.
Dave Veach seconds.
need a vote on that, Ginny?
Ginny says
Lee?
yes.
I vote yes.
Paul?
All votes yes.
Randy
Randy?
votes yes.
And Veach votes yes.
That's a unanimous vote, 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Well, we have to vote no on something, will you mind? Oh, good, okay. Sarah, 23-114, please.
Application number 23-114, B&N Real Estate Trust, care of William G. Litchfield Esquire, 330 Orleans Road, North Chatham, Mass. 02650. Owner of property located at 668 Orleans Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 15I, Block 9, Lot 18. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a non-conforming guest house on a non-conforming lot via the demolition of the existing guest house and the construction of a new guest house. The existing guest house is non-conforming and that it is located 15.6 feet from the easterly abutter and exceeds 50% of the floor area allowed for a guest house by 559 square feet, or 28.8%. The proposed guest house will be non-conforming in that it will be located 20 feet from the easterly abutter where a 25-foot setback is required, and will exceed the allowable 50% of floor area by 2,603 square feet, or 134%. The existing building coverage is 2,903 square feet, and the proposed building coverage is 2,888 square feet, where 2,850 square feet is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 25,667 square feet, where 40,000 square feet is required in the R40 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Protective Bylaw.
Mr. Litchfield.
Good afternoon or evening. And his son Benjamin J. Nickerson's home. He's in the rear. And we hope that the main house is soon thereafter going to be Benjamin R. Nickerson's home. Chris is Ben's brother, which makes life somewhat more simple because he's not, we couldn't have two Benjamins in one generation. Also with us is Ezra Ambrose of Ambrose Homes, who has designed a, we think, very attractive looking Greek Revival, or rather Greek Revival gable end to the home, to the street, replacement for the existing structure. And the purpose is fairly straightforward. It's to move this, continue this family on in a location where it's been for about 100 years, and allow Ben J., the current father, to move into what we have to call the guest house, because under town rules, that's what it is, and to allow the next generation to move into the main house. I'm pleased to report parenthetically that this is a public way. There are no questions of access to it. We don't claim to own the fee in the way, and we all have the rights to drive up and down Orleans Road. The existing main house in the front is about 1,200 square feet of footprint. It has no basement. If it did, It has a crawl space, but if it had a full basement, we could double the floor area, we wouldn't have the unusual numbers that we have in this application. The existing barn, guest house, accessory building, cottage, whatever you want to call it, is already larger than the first floor of the main house. It's about 1,500 square feet, and the main house is about 1,200 square feet. And because we're going to have a full basement under the new structure, you have to calculate in accordance with our bylaw, the crazy percentage that Sarah read. But in reality, it's not going to be any bigger than it is now. It's actually going to be smaller. The footprint is going to be smaller. 1,500 square feet of that 5,000 square foot is going to be below ground, and you won't be able to see it in any event. The other reason that we had to call this the guest house is the flip side of something you may recall from less than a year ago, right across the street at 571 Orleans Road, where the family in the old Tripp family house, it's now the Minor family, the Miners came before you and said, we have a house, we're going to turn that into the guest house. And they eliminated a bedroom from that because our bylaw says you can only have 2 bedrooms in a guest house. We don't want to eliminate a bedroom. We want to have 3 bedrooms in the main house for the next generation of the family. And Benji is completely happy with a 2-bedroom guest house, so we're not asking for relief from that. So what we're proposing to do is to eliminate the back building, which is 120 feet back from Orleans Road, and rebuild it, a 2-bedroom guest house. There's some question that I'll get to later as to whether this ever was built as a guest house, but we'll worry about that later. So I'll go into the criteria and then talk about some of the other oddities, because I know you've had a long hearing already. As to adequacy of site, including building coverage and setbacks, notwithstanding the setback and lot size nonconformities, the site is certainly adequate for the main house built. The town says in 1870, but the Massachusetts Historical Commission says built in 1890, built by Ben's great-grandfather. It's also adequate for the barn or cottage, which we think was built before 1938 and was renovated in 1962 under prior zoning. If you approve the special permit, you can do so based on a finding that the site is adequate for reconstruction of the existing cottage or barn or whatever we want to call it, and thereby enabling continued family use. Coverage will be below the 2,950 square feet number, which is applicable here. The site already has 2 residences, 2 separate dwelling units. We're proposing to lessen the sideline encroachment. Right now, we are 15 feet from the sideline, and we're going to move it to 20 feet, which will be better. Parenthetically, that sideline on which we encroach is a right-of-way, not a right-of-way, a panhandle portion of a lot on Riders Cove, which is owned by yet another member of the Nickerson family. So the sideline to which we're too close is really not objectionable to Ben's Aunt Nancy. As to compatibility of size with the neighborhood, we have a mid-sized lot for the neighborhood. And when you go up and down that part of Orleans Road, you know, all the houses are fairly close to the street. So the larger lots go way down. Mrs. Hour's lot across the street goes halfway to Chatham High School, but you wouldn't know about it because of the configuration of the lots. So all the lots look essentially similar. Like several others, our lot contains a significant accessory structure. If you approve the special permit, you can do so based on a finding that it will remain compatible. The coverage is reduced further below the limit. It's consistent with neighboring properties. If you look at the 3rd page of the handout, you will see that in terms of our footprint, combined footprint is going down by a few square feet. It's 1,000 square feet less than what's across the street, or 2 doors down. And if you're looking at gross floor area at 671 and 676 Main Street or Orleans Road, which are one's across the street and one's next door, we're going to be much smaller than those structures or those properties, even with 2 houses, that one shown there, because it has a basement. That floor area is going to be seen from Orleans Road. So I think you can find it's consistent with its surroundings. Again, it's set far back from the street, and the footprint is less than that of the existing structure. As to the extent of increase in nonconformity, the sideline encroachment improves. We're lessening the nonconformity. The floor area increases, but again, that's largely a function of necessarily counting the basement, and because the main house just has a crawl space, which we can't count. As the suitability of site, impact on the natural environment, the site has been suitable for residential use for 135 years, since long before Ben's grandfather acquired it. If you approve the special permit, it remains suitable. There are no wetlands, no environmental issues. As to scale siting mass views and vistas, again, it's an historic neighborhood characterized by Greek revivals and Victorian homes, many with barns and substantial accessory structures. What is being proposed for, as was shown there a moment ago, the elevations with the gable end to the street and typical wing to the side, I think you can find the reconstructed house to be appropriate for the neighborhood, for the site, consistent with the neighborhood. Sited again far back from Orleans Road, but I think it'll be a positive addition to the streetscape. The mass is consistent with the surroundings, and it has no impact on neighborhood views and vistas. Although actually, because we are getting further away from the sideline, it will increase the view corridor down to Riders Cove. There's a fairly narrow one now, and it's going to be 5 feet wider because we're moving further away from the lot line. As to the compatibility of use, it's residential, and it's going to continue on, enabling another generation of the family to remain on the property. As to adequacy of sewage and water, there are no issues there. We have a septic system for 5 bedrooms. The health agent has reviewed it and approved it. So the issue is whether reconstruction of what we have to call a guest house, we could also call the barn, or the cottage, or the separate dwelling unit, we could call it any of those things, at a longtime family home, with improvement of the setback deficiency and complying coverage is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. You may know that I actually listen to what you say. And a week ago, in a project in South Chatham, your chairman said, anywhere you go in New England, you find accessory buildings larger than main houses. Nothing unusual about that, nothing uncommon, and it can be very appropriate. That's exactly what's going to happen here, because we have to count the basement floor. Our floor area is going to be larger than that of the main house because it just has a crawl space. But the house will remain compatible with the neighborhood. The gross floor area and the living area are in keeping with the abutting properties and significantly lower than that of some others. It will be a reasonable house in either comparative or absolute terms. The house versus guest house versus dwelling unit is a function really of the bylaw's limitations on the number of bedrooms and secondary dwellings. We can only have 2. That's why the new building is going to continue on as the guest house. In fact, according to the records I've seen, it existed before 1938, not just as the 1962 guest house, but it existed long before that as a separate dwelling unit. The family has a long history in the neighborhood. I'm not asking for special credit because they've been in the neighborhood a long time. What I am asking for is a finding that will give them the ability to do something that we talk about and talk about and talk about and do precious little about, which is to allow attainable housing for a family to continue on where buying a separate property in this town is essentially impossible. This is an ADU uncapitalized, okay? It's an affordable dwelling unit. It's going to be in the family. There's not going to be a rental involved because Benji's going to live there. It is, however, going to allow the next generation to live in the main house, which I had understood is something we'd like to see in this town, having people younger than I remain here. Sarah doesn't live here. She's younger than I am, but she has to live out of town. We obviously need this sort of relief in our town, and I don't think anyone questions about that. So while you obviously, rather than neighbors, ultimately make the determination, neighborhood support can be a good indication of a lack of detriment. There are 2 or 3 letters in your file. Any of you who've been on the board for any length of time know that Eileen Auer, a former member of our select board, is not shy about writing letters. Eileen lives across the street. She was not able to write a letter, but she asked me, she authorized me to tell you that she has absolutely no objections and thinks this is entirely appropriate. If Mrs. Auer doesn't have any concerns, I hope that you won't either. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there anyone here today in the audience or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak in favor of this application? If so, please indicate now you'd like to join the meeting.
There's no one to speak in favor.
I'll read the correspondence. First, we have an email. This is from Judith Georgia, a health agent here in town. She writes on 12/12, I've reviewed the plan to demo and reconstruct. The existing property is considered 2 bedrooms. The plan will maintain the 2-bedroom layout. However, it appears to be 2 separate units. A new septic tank is proposed for the new dwelling. Then we have a letter. This is from Heather Bierce. She writes on, it was received on the 13th of December. I live at 684 Orleans Road. My family, like Benji's, has lived in this neighborhood for several generations, and this proposal is an ideal way to allow another generation of a local family to remain in Chatham. I urge the ZBA to grant the request for a special permit. This is an entirely appropriate project and will not be at all detrimental to our neighborhood. Then we have a letter from Benjamin Emery on December 13th. I'm writing in support of the petition for a special permit to allow for the reconstruction of the guest house. I live at 640 Orleans Road, 2 doors down, and as a nearby abutter, I hope the board will approve the request. I have seen the plans, which are attractive and appropriate, and many of the properties along this part of Orleans Road, mine included, have similar secondary structures. At least equal importance. I understand the goal is to allow yet another generation of the Nickerson family to enjoy our neighborhood, something which should be strongly encouraged. I respectfully urge the board to vote in support of this request. And then we have a letter. This is from Joyce Hutchins, 650 Orleans Road. She writes on December 13th, my family and I have lived next door to the Nickerson property since 1957. I'm aware of Benjamin Nickerson's plans to rebuild a barn or guest house so that he can live there and allow the next generation of the family to live in the main house. As an immediate abutter, I am writing into support of the proposal, which will have no negative consequence for our neighborhood. I hope the Board of Appeals will approve the special permit. That's the extent of the correspondence. Is there anyone here today or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak either against or has a specific question? If so, please indicate you'd like to join the conversation.
There's no one in opposition or with a question.
Okay, questions from the board. Ginny?
Oh, thank you. Mr. Litchfield, so first of all, I think there might be a discrepancy between the 2950 square feet that you reference. The ad says 2850 is the maximum allowed.
That's probably a typographical error on my part. 2850 is the number.
So then they're not, they are actually at 2888 square feet. They're over, not under. Is that correct?
We're reducing it, I'm sorry, it's not compliant, yeah.
Okay.
It's being, it is being reduced marginally from 2903 to 2888.
Yes, 2903 to 28. Okay, and then, but it is, I'm sorry.
Actually, that is a mistake on my part. The correct number is 2950 is the allowable coverage. That was a typo, an error on my part.
Okay.
So it should not have been the 2850, it's 2950 is the
Okay.
maximum allowed.
Okay, there we go. Okay, and then I think you said, Mr. Litchfield, that the footprint is less than the existing?
Correct.
By how much? Because I'm just looking at the rendering. It looks like it's configured differently,
I
but
can
it,
give it to you, it's on this, it's 1529 and 1499, Ezra? It's something like, existing is 1,529 square feet, proposed 1,499 square feet.
okay, all right. I guess the picture is a little misleading. It looks like it's about the same, just configured differently. And then you made a comment about the basement. So I didn't factor those numbers in. But when I look at page 5, 1 of 5, so it didn't have a basement before. It had a crawl space, right? So proposed north elevation shows basically the basement
From the water.
from the
Yep.
water,
Yep.
which you will see from the seascape. The,
I'm sorry?
which you will see that from the, that's part of the, you will see that visually from the sea, so the, you know, the water side.
Well, if you look across the Clark Tansey property, which is between this and Riders Cove, yes.
Yeah, okay. And then on page 4 of 5 is the existing north elevation, which you do not see what you see on 1 of 5, right? Page 1 of 5. But is that little window there, that is part of the crawl space in that you're seeing right there?
Yeah,
Okay.
there is a door into the basement of the cottage now, but there's not much down there.
Okay,
Three-quarter block.
okay. That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Dave,
I have no questions, Dave.
Randy,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I just want to frame this real easy. If you took the basement calculation out of the proposed guest house, right? You would not be 134% over.
That is correct.
What would you be over?
I'd have to do the math, which I can't do off the top of my head, but considerably lower.
Considerably.
Yeah, a third lower roughly, because we're talking about 1,500
Right.
times 3, 4,500, subtract out 1 floor, it's a third less.
Yeah. I have trouble counting the basement in this, because he's not going to use that as living space, is he?
This will not come as a shock to you, but there are some flaws in our bylaw.
Right.
If I have a 100 square foot, there are no 100 square, if I have a 1,000 square foot house here with a basement, and a 1,500 square foot house here with no basement, the gross floor area of this house, the smaller house, is larger. Counting gross floor area is a flaw in our bylaw, particularly for basements. This is not, but particularly for basements which are completely below elevation. What does that got to do with size? Nothing. Nonetheless, that's what the bylaw says.
So it sounds like a distinction without a difference.
I think Sarah might have an answer for you.
So if you excluded the basement from the proposed, the guest house would be 314 square feet larger than the main house.
Only 314.
As opposed to 134 or whatever.
Well, no, that's the percentage.
Yeah, okay, right.
I'm not going to pretend to know.
No,
what the percentage is.
134%.
Mr. Briggs took care of that part for me. I'm just looking at square footage numbers.
Yeah.
So,
It's larger now and it would continue larger.
right, so the existing house is 559 square feet. Overage over what would be allowed. The allowable 50% currently is only 970 square feet.
So 970 is allowed, and you're asking for what number?
We're currently going, in terms of the footprint, the footprint is actually going down, so that
Yeah,
doesn't.
no, the square footage, I think we're talking about.
If you eliminated the
You
basement.
eliminate the basement.
It's 1,284 square feet over, well,
And
what's
with the
allowed.
total number, if that's what Ms. Potash is asking for, is 1,522.54.
2254, without the basement.
Without the
So it's-
basement,
it's a
square
good
footage is
size house.
2254.
I mean, this guest house, so to speak, it's a pretty nice size house. Okay.
Yeah, it's a 1,500 square foot house. It's not a tiny building, but we think the lot lends itself to it. And again, looking at the comparisons around the neighborhood, it fits in perfectly.
Paul,
I have no questions.
Lee,
No questions.
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
need a vote?
Ginny votes yes.
Lee?
I vote yes.
All vote yes.
Randy votes yes.
Veach votes yes.
All right.
Well, when I read the ad and looked at it, this this numbers look like, whoa, what is this? But this is a case where, as Bill said, I mean, I think this is, so first of all, this is a case of all of this is pre-existing non-conforming, which we see for various reasons. And here's a situation where trying to fit the description of the situation to the definition of the current bylaw doesn't give us really a good comparison to what's proposed versus what's there. So I've just set that part aside, the numbers on that part of it, because to me, what they're seeking to do, well, first of all, thank you, Bill, for tying it into the town's efforts to provide more in the way of ADUs and various kinds of things, and because that is a situation that's being done by the Nickerson family here. But when you look at the building that's there and what they're seeking to do, there's I don't, it's certainly, this is not anything that's substantially more detrimental in the neighborhood. I think it'll be an improvement on the property. The building that's designed definitely references the building that's there. It honors the building that's there. It improves it. It provides for the family. It provides, it's going to look it's going to look fine, certainly not substantially more detrimental, and meets all of our criteria, and I will be happy to support it.
Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is not a variance, so I don't think I have to be as concerned whether we can do it. So I like the fact that the children want to live near their parents. I mean, that says a lot for the family right there. I admire that. I think it's a great thing. And also to age in place is great and have family nearby. These are the purposes, portions of the purpose and intent of the bylaw is to have these things. So there's really no purpose and intent of the bylaw that this violates. It's not even really overcrowding of land because of the space of the coverage. So I want to hear from the rest of my colleagues, but I'm inclined to support it right now.
Paul?
Well, the interesting thing is that we're going out to look at a lot on Orleans Road, and it's huge. I mean, you go out there and you suddenly think, well, I should be singing Born Free or something, because it's all so open and spacious. Clearly, the location of this guest house, as you would call it, or second house, clearly is adapted to the lot, and the lot can certainly handle it, and we can encourage families to be able to live together and carry on. That's fantastic. I think it's clearly not substantially more detrimental.
Lee?
So I agree with my colleagues. I think this is a win-win-win situation. I think what threw me off is the guest house reference. That was hard to understand, but now that your presentation was fantastic, and now that I see what's involved and the reasons, I am in support.
Jen?
So I still need some convincing. I do have a follow-up question, going back to the 50%. So that is not applicable based on the way that it read in the ad because of what you said today about the basement, correct? That is it not true that it's not over the 50%?
Well, it already is over the 50%. The existing house is already more, the floor area of the existing house, cottage, barn,
Yep.
is already more than 50% of the floor area of the main house.
Okay, so that is a fact, so that's true, and you're asking to go a bit larger?
Correct.
Okay, I have a problem with that. I don't see how that isn't a violation of, and I love the family heritage and all of that, but.
Well, let me go back, if I can interrupt you, because this is very important. This is what you do at not you personally, this is what the Board of Appeals does. When zoning is enacted, things that exist get a protection. In 1962, when this building was created, we think it was there before that, but there weren't rules and regulations about the floor area being not more than 50%. So the statute says, if you have a nonconformity like this, a taxpayer, a voter, a citizen can come to the zoning board of appeals, which if it finds it to the proposed change to be not substantially more detrimental, it can grant a special permit. I know you know that. Pardon me. The percentage is odd. The percentage is odd because we have to count the floor area.
Okay, thank you for that. However, when I look at these renderings, going back to 1 of 5, and which is proposed, and the existing, which is 4 of 5, it is, in particular, the proposed north elevation from what's existing. Well, actually, not even just that one, the west, I mean, it is not a guest house, it's a house, it's the second house on this lot, in my view. So I understand that you've meeting coverage, and you have approved, although still non-conforming, the eastern setback, eastern abutter setback. But I just have a problem with the fact that you're already over the 50% and you have an opportunity to start over with a new demo and redesign. And I don't like the fact that it's asking for more. I appreciate the family heritage, but the Nickersons may not live there forever at some point. And then someone, I don't know, I'm struggling a bit with the fairness across the town when we look at these.
Yeah, from my standpoint, and I know sometimes we don't pay much attention to the neighbors, but I'm very impressed that all the neighbors think that this is a great idea, and for various reasons. And I hear what Ginny says, because I'm one of those individuals that doesn't like to see things expand, like the last one that Mr. Riley had, that expanded, and that I wasn't thrilled about it, but that wasn't the driving force to me. So I think this should be approved. Paul?
I will move to approve the application as submitted, with the condition that all construction activity and vehicles be contained on site or at a neighboring property with the permission of the property owner. I'm not sure that we need additional conditions other than that. It seems to me, given the family nature of everybody that's around there.
Could, bear with me 1 second.
Sure.
Could you wait until Labor Day to start construction, or alternatively, can you finish between February 1st and June 30th?
We can get the outside work done.
Outside work can be completed by June 30th.
All right. In that case, then we will add, between June 30th and Labor Day, no exterior construction would be allowed. No work should be permitted on the weekends, and construction activity would be between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. only.
Dave Veach seconds.
Randy, I think you had a quick question.
I do, just before you second it, if I could. I like the topic that Ginny probably raised, but maybe not explicitly. But the issue is whether or not these folks are always going to own the property, and someday is this going to just be, a seasonal rental? And the town also frowns on that, I think. So is there a way to deed restrict this or limit it? Are you comfortable with that, or is that too much to ask?
I would say that, and I'll be brief, but this is akin to, because it's on guest house, that's what comes to mind. The Board of Appeals has the ability to waive the double lot size requirement if it's to be occupied by an immediate family member. Mr. Briggs has said in the past that there's really no effective way to enforce that. That if the family member dies, moves on, or anything else, can it be rented? I asked Ben if it had ever been Benji, I'm sorry, because his father and grandfather will get mad. I asked Benji if it had ever been rented or if it's ever going to be rented. I can't quote all of his words because we're on Channel 8, but it's not going to be rented. And if he tells me that, I believe him.
Yeah,
Can we say what's going to happen 40 years from now? No.
Is there a way that they'd agree to somehow restrict it? No? Okay.
I'd be,
No? All right, never mind.
I'd
Just thought
hesitate to
ask.
do that on the fly.
I just thought, well, okay.
So We've had a motion, it's been seconded. Time to vote. Ginny?
Ginny votes no.
Lee?
I vote yes.
All votes yes.
Yes.
And Vitro, yes.
So that passes 4-1.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Folks in the production booth, can we take a 5-minute break, please? Thank you. Okay, here we go. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Sarah, please read 23-115.
Application number 23-115, Kimberly and Richard Williams, care of Theodore Stribert, 15 Linden Tree Lane, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Owners of property located at 30 Ocean View Terrace, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 15F, Block 58, Lot 82. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a non-conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot via the construction of an addition and the replacement of the existing roof structure. The existing dwelling is non-conforming and it is located 10.1 feet from the easterly abutter. The proposed addition will be non-conforming in that it will be located 10.5 feet from the easterly abutter where a 15-foot setback is required. The existing building coverage is 936 square feet, 9.8%, and the proposed building coverage is 1,328 square feet, 13.9%, where 15% is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 60 feet of frontage where 100 feet is required, and contains 9,555 square feet of land area where 20,000 square feet is required in the R20 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Protective Bylaw.
Welcome, Sam. Sorry that you had to wait, but
It's,
such is progress, right?
goes with the territory.
That's right.
Sam Stryber, the architect for Rick and Kim Williams at 30 Ocean View Terrace. The existing house has 2 bedrooms and a bath and a living room and a kitchen, but has no dining room or even a cozy nook with a table. It has no second social space, so that visiting and TV can take place at the same time. It is small and crowded at 660 square feet. A typical 2-bedroom apartment might be 750 to 800 square feet. Frontage is also a non-conforming at 60.5 feet, where 100 feet is required. The logical way to expand is to the rear. A single addition across the back gives space for sitting, dining, and a study nook. A small deck opens into the backyard. The lot is the second largest on the street. The largest is at the end of the street at 18,440 square feet, built in 1935. It is still not conforming to the 20,000 required on the smallest lot is to the 20,000 required. The smallest lot is a panhandle at 5,855. It seems that 10,000 square feet and 10-foot side yard was an earlier rule in 1953. Fortunately, the front yard is 37 feet deep, and the right side is 23 feet wide, so the layout gives the impression of spaciousness. The addition and the deck are nearly out of sight to the rear. The new addition follows the non-conforming east side of the house from 10.5 feet to 10.6 feet from the rear corner. This side yard matches the closer abutter side yard. Adding to the rear makes the most sense because of the extra space to the lot line. Going from 79.8 feet to the new deck at 54.3 feet gives plenty of extra space on the lot in the future. The owner is planning a new front walkway and foundation planning to go with the new front porch. The broken asphalt driveway will be removed and bordered stone pebble driveway will be installed. This will give a more welcoming look to the house. I believe okay, so I think you've been looking at the plan. This is the this is the front porch that we're adding, and this is the setback in the front. And then we're going to add 14 feet across the back, and then a little 12-foot deck here. And if you could go to the elevation. This is the side, this is that side, the west side of the house, and this is the addition. We looked at all kinds of different ways of doing the roof, and they have a budget concern, so we're going to be doing a layover roof on this addition. So here's the little front porch, here's the deck in the back, and the access to a basement under the new addition. Should I read the criteria?
No, thank you.
No.
No, not
Okay.
necessary.
This is it, pretty
Right.
much.
That's right. Okay, is there anyone here today or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak in favor of this application? If so, please indicate you'd like to join the meeting now.
There's no one to speak in favor.
Okay, I'll read the correspondence. Giorgio writes on 12/12, I've reviewed the plan to renovate. The existing dwelling has 2 bedrooms. The proposal maintains the 2 bedrooms and is acceptable, no concerns. Is there anyone either here on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak either against or has a specific question? If so, please indicate you'd like to join the meeting.
There's no one to speak in opposition or with a question.
Okay, questions from the board. Does anybody have any questions?
No questions. I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote? Ginny?
Ginny votes yes.
Lee?
I vote yes.
All votes yes?
Yes,
Veach votes yes.
Okay. Deliberations. Randy?
meets the criteria, and I'm supportive of it.
Paul?
Modest proposal on a modest property, and it certainly is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood.
Lee?
I would agree, it's a great project. It meets the criteria. Is the garage part of any of this?
They were, when they first contacted me, we walk on the site, there was a shed that was falling over, and then this garage, and they were ready to demolish both. And I said, the garage is usable in a pinch, and since you're on a budget, I'd keep it, there are things you're gonna move into the garage during construction, so keep it, and you can renovate it. Certainly, some of the siding is falling off, and it can be renovated, and if they want to go do more, they can demolish it and rebuild it, so.
I think the garage is a classic. So, that's it.
Jenny?
I think that was good advice, Sam. I love this house. I think it's great, and I think that your plans are good and very good, and agree it's meets our criteria, and I would approve it.
Dave?
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with the previous. I'd just like to take a second to reference in looking at this property, the owners purchased it from the estate of Jerry and Jeff Frank. And Jerry and Jeff Frank, the Frank twins, as they were known in Chatham,
Elvis twins.
have been an iconic presence in the town of Chatham for as long as I've been here, and even before I arrived back in the early 70s sometime. And so it would be either at the Squire or at Larry's or at the Starbucks out at Stop and Shop, or in their pickup truck driving around town. But they were some remarkable characters, and I just wanted to make mention of that.
Yeah, what Lee said, I want to double down on. I love that garage the way it is. And if there's ever a cupola in town that I love, it's the one on top of that, I gotta tell you. It's just perfect.
I'll move to approve the application as submitted. I think we probably do need some conditions on it. The construction activity and vehicles would be contained on site or at neighboring property with the permission of the property owner. Between June 30th and Labor Day, no exterior construction will be allowed, no work could be permitted on weekends, and construction activity would be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. only.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote on that, Ginny?
Ginny votes yes.
Lee?
I vote yes.
All votes yes?
Yes.
Veach votes yes.
That's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, Sam.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Application number 23-117, C&K Chipping Stone LLC, care of William G. Litchfield Esquire, 330 Orleans Road, North Chatham, Mass. 02650. Owners of property located at 90 Chipping Stones Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 7F, Block 19, Lot C370. The applicant seeks to modify special permit number 22-103 granted on November 17, 2022, which allowed for the construction of a second floor and addition, as well as the reconstruction and expansion of a conforming deck. The applicant now seeks to modify the special permit to allow for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a new dwelling. The existing dwelling is non-conforming and that it is located 30.6 feet from the road and 10.4 feet from the northerly abutter. The proposed dwelling will be non-conforming in that it will be located 30.6 feet from the road where a 40-foot setback is required and 10.4 feet from the northerly abutter where a 25-foot setback is required. The existing building coverage is 2,599 square feet and the proposed building coverage is 2,881 square feet where 2,950 square feet is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 28,108 square feet, where 60,000 square feet is required in the R60 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Sections 6 and 9, and Sections 5B and 8D, 2B of the protective bylaw.
Mr. Litchfield.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Bill Litchfield, here on behalf of the applicants, Ron Chairman and Rita Bolcher. With me is Bernadette McLeod of Ryder and Wilcox Design It, who did the design plans, and I will be brief in light of the length of time. In fact, it was 3 hours ago that the chairman mentioned the Board of Construction Error Appeals. We are here for that purpose again. The short version is that back in November of 2022, you unanimously approved a proposal for a small addition to the kitchen and to put a 3/4 story above this ranch structure in River Bay. During the summer of 2023, as Sarah and Jay will recall, Bernadette and Dave Little and I had some further discussions with the Department of Community Development about making some very modest changes to what was approved, putting on a small portico entryway on the front. That was approved. I mention it only, however, to illustrate that the homeowners and I had absolutely, and Bernadette, had absolutely no intention or desire that what happened happened. What did happen very apparently is that I got a call in November from Sarah that said that a stop work order had been put on the project because the walls of the house had been demolished, taken down. The house was partially demolished. That was not approved in the special permit. It was in error. A fault of the builder, and he unfortunately couldn't be here. He may be out of state beyond the reach of extradition, I don't know, but it was an error for which we all apologize. What we are seeking now is an after-the-fact modification of the special permit to allow for rebuilding of what was there, together with the small expansion that you already approved and the three-quarter story above. We're not proposing any change whatsoever to the plans. Those which you approved a year ago are those which we're seeking to have built. There's no increase in the ridge height. There is no increase in the square footage. There is no increase whatsoever. So it was an error for which we apologize. We regret it. The homeowner regrets it particularly because of the cost and the difficulty and delay. I will say that Jay was entirely appropriate in issuing the stop work order, but then when the correct application was filed, he authorized the builder to go forward at his own risk to not further delay the project. So I can go into the criteria briefly, Mr. Chairman. Ought I do that?
I think in this case you should.
Very good. Adequacy of site, notwithstanding the nonconformities as to sideline and street setbacks and lot size, the site is adequate. It will remain adequate for construction of the new three-quarter story above, as previously approved, on the existing footprint, with the conforming 207 square foot expansion of the kitchen, as well as the reconfiguration of the decks. There is no change proposed in coverage or in setbacks. Coverage is still below the limit. As to compatibility of size, we have a relatively large lot at just under 3/4 of an acre in a neighborhood with all 325 or 350 houses are non-conforming as to lot size. The existing gross floor area and land and living area are compatible, as is coverage at 8.8%. If you approve the modified special permit, the goal remains the same, an increase in living area, but there's no impact from the reconstruction on that change or compatibility. The size remains minimized by the topography, since the ridge of the new upper story will remain 30 feet back from the street. It's only about 16 feet above street level, and it's about 9 feet higher than the pre-existing ridge. As to the extent of increase in nonconformities, there is none. The house is and will remain nonconforming as to sideline and street setbacks, but there's no change in the existing dimensional nonconformities. The additional coverage is minimal. The portico above the front door, which we've rolled into the request because we obviously have to come back to you. As to suitability of site, the Conservation Commission has approved the prior plans, and Ryder and Wilcox, Bernadette and David were both in touch with the Conservation Commission as to the current situation, and the commission is unconcerned about the rebuilding. There's a letter that the chair will read to that effect. As to scale, sighting, mass, views, and vistas, what had been there is a ranch largely below the street level, not readily visible, although home to this family for the last 4 decades. If you approve the modified special permit, modified only to include rebuilding, the scale remains appropriate and the architectural plans echo the existing home. It has a limited impact on streetscape due to vegetation and topography. As to compatibility of use, it's a residential use without change. The floor plan has been reviewed and approved by the Board of Health, so there's no issue there. The question then is whether the rebuilding of the house, together with the previously approved construction of the three-quarter story on the existing footprint, plus a conforming addition to the kitchen, is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than was the now removed, partially removed anyway, non-conforming structure. The aspects of nonconformity, such as lot size, apply to every single one of the houses in the neighborhood. Coverage, well, it remains below the maximum allowed. The house itself will be largely hidden. The three-quarter story you already found not to be a substantial detriment, so really the sole issue before you is the after-the-fact approval to rebuild what had been there. Sort of a interesting question as to what happens if you don't allow us to rebuild it. Does that mean we rebuild it or don't rebuild it? We have to rebuild it. And I'm not meaning to say that you have no choice. You always have choices. But I, on behalf of the homeowners who had nothing to do with it, apologize to you, to Mr. Briggs. I think Jay's already made it clear that this will never happen again with this builder, and I can echo that thought. So we are asking for your indulgence, but I think that in light of the criteria in the plans, you can find that the proposed change, or better yet, the proposed reversion to the house that ought not to have been partially demolished, is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak in favor? If so, please indicate you'd like to speak.
There is no one to speak in favor.
I'll read the correspondence. The first is from Judith Giorgio. She writes on 12/12, I have reviewed the plan to modify the special permit. The existing property is considered 3 bedrooms. The plan will maintain the 3-bedroom layout of the property. The plan allows for an office on the first floor as part of the bedroom suite and is therefore acceptable. Then we have a note from the Conservation Commission. They write on November 21st. The applicant has been issued an order of conditions that was issued in 2022. The applicant has consulted with Paul Whiteman, and no additional filings are required for the changes. The project has been conditioned to meet the performance standards under the Wetlands Protection Act and the Town of Chatham Local Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 272, and regulations promulgated thereunder. And then we have a note. This is from John Alberts, 136 Chipping Stone Road, who writes on December 6th, I'm submitting this letter to the ZBA to record my objection as an abutter to the proposed zoning changes outlined under this application. I objected to special permit 22-103 dated November 17th, 2022, based on the fact that the existing dwelling was built on a non-conforming lot and the proposed changes would take this property even further out of compliance. Since this time, the homeowner has violated Chatham building codes, and at this time, I vehemently oppose the granting of this application. In November 2023, the home was demolished without a building permit, and a stop work order was placed on the home by the Chatham building inspector. After a 3-week period, the builder was allowed to resume work, and the remainder of the house and garage was demolished, and new construction was allowed to resume. I question why this project has been allowed to go forward when a public hearing was scheduled to be held on Thursday, December 14th, 2023. The homeowner and the builder have violated the building permit, gone ahead and resumed construction, and done so without permission of the Chatham Zoning Board. Furthermore, the plans as shown will take this house further out of compliance in regards to setbacks, and now they propose a dwelling height 28.9 feet when the existing dwelling was 19.9 feet. I strongly encourage this project be stopped and the Chatham ZBA deny this zoning appeal. And then we have a note. This is from Jeffrey Vanacore on December 10th. My wife and I live at 60 Wequassett Way around the corner. We write in support. To evaluate the request, I contacted the owners of the subject property and requested the drawings for the proposed modifications. I have reviewed the modifications carefully, including an in-person walk-around of the subject property with the permission of the owners, to satisfy myself that the modifications are in the best interest of the neighborhood, a neighborhood that is very special to my wife and I. I believe the requested modifications substantially improve the previous structure and believe that there will be no negative consequences for our neighborhood. In fact, I believe the requested modifications substantially improve the existing structure and add value to the neighborhood. I request the Board of Appeals to approve the special permit. The board is welcome to contact me with any questions. That is the extent of the correspondence. Is there anyone here today or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak against this or has a specific question? The gentleman in the back, yes, sir.
Chairman of the board, members of the zoning committee. My name is John Alberts. I live at 136 Chippingstone Road. As outlined in my letter, I vehemently oppose this project based on the fact that they did go ahead without a permit to tear down the building. They are within the wetland conservation zone of Pickerel Pond. One tree was proposed to be taken out, and 4 trees were taken out. I received a letter in August of '22 with the proposals, which then went ahead and was approved without further notification of the abutters. So I question the Zoning Board of Appeals process, and I feel that you are going down a slippery slope of nonconformities.
Is there anyone else in the audience? Yes, the lady. Yes, sir.
Thank you. This is my first time at this.
Could you please tell us who you are?
Oh, yes. My name is Tulsi Srinivas, and I own the property at 106 Chippingstone Road, which abuts on the northerly side of 90 Chippingstone Road, I believe. I'm a professor. And this is my first time, so forgive me. I'm a little nervous. I love River Bay, and I love the town of Chatham, and that's why we moved here. I live in that house with my husband, my pet parrot, and my 96-year-old mother, who chose that house for us to live in because of the view of the lake and the neighborhood. She loved the low ranches, you know, the 1960s kind of style, the shingle. We just fell in love with Chatham. And so I am, if you can put up the site map, I just want to show you what has happened to our property as a result of this. So I don't have a pointer. Is this it? Yeah. Oh. Well, it doesn't, I don't know how to use it. Aha, okay. So we live here. And this is all conservation land, and this is Perch Pond. So when we moved in, this house, as the owners and the lawyers said, was just because of the topography of the land towards the lake. The ridge line was just at the level of the road, so you can barely see these houses. That's what makes it so beautiful, because you can see the lake through the trees, and the houses don't impede your vision. And our house is just the same. It's on a slope downwards, and you can barely see the house. And then as the topography rises, you see the houses as you come up the hill. You start seeing the houses. So what struck me was when you're inside the house, you can't see another human being. And that's the beauty of Chatham to me. You feel like you're in the middle of nature. And I'm not against development. I used to be an architect myself. But now, when I'm in my house, all I see is a blank wall that's rising 30 feet. And so it's cutting off light, it's cutting off my access, it's cutting off my view of the trees. And I really feel then, what is the charm of Chatham if this is what it's going to become? And it really upsets me, as you can hear from my voice. What I loved about that house was it was low-slung like my own. It was not obtrusive, it was not big. It was charming. And to me, the house that's now proposed is not. It's reducing the value of my property. It's very large sitting on the side. It's just 10.4 feet from my lot line. And my house is 10.4 feet away from my lot line. So I'm 20 feet from a sheer 30-foot wall. Imagine if you had that happening to you. That's all I have to say. So I request that you ask for them to build it back, but not to the height of 30 feet.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, either here or on Microsoft Teams, that wishes to speak against or has a specific question?
I don't see anyone else that wishes to speak.
Mr. Litchfield, did you want any time for rebuttal?
I'm not sure that rebuttal is absolutely necessary, Mr. Chairman. I certainly understand the concerns of the neighbors. We apologize again for the issue. I do think that the view from 106 toward Pickerel Pond is the primary view, and we're not in that view corridor at all. That house looks to the west and we are to the south. But I think you've had a long enough evening without me going forward.
Thank you. Okay, questions from the board? Dave?
Maybe, so I went out and looked around, and it looks to me like they did keep and work with the existing first floor deck structure. That's correct, isn't it?
That is
So what
correct.
we're talking about really here are the walls on the first floor. Okay, and I don't recall, I know there was some neighborhood letters in opposition to this project in November was it November 22?
November of 22.
And I don't remember that we had an objection from the abutter at 106. You wrote a letter in opposition, okay, thank you. All right, that's all I had for questions, Dave.
Randy?
I don't have any questions.
Paul?
I have no questions.
Lee?
No questions.
Jenny?
Quick question, Mr. Litchfield, because of the comment that the neighbor made. I wasn't on the board in November of 2022, and my understanding from what you said and in your criteria here that you've laid out, this whole plan was previously approved by the
Correct.
zoning board.
You're exactly correct.
I just wanted to re-clarify that.
Yep.
I think that is the key, and you also said earlier, no changes whatsoever.
The only change is a 30-square-foot portico in the front covered entryway. That is the only change. And if I'm correct, Jay and Sarah had indicated that could have been built as a matter of right anyway because of its size. But that is the sole change.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote on that? Jenny?
Jenny votes yes.
Lee?
I vote yes.
All votes yes?
Randy?
Yes.
And Veach votes yes.
Okay. Deliberations. Randy?
So I always consider whether or not I would have approved it in the first place. And I don't know if I was voting then or that day, or if it was even a meeting that I might have missed, but I would have, and so I do.
Paul?
And thank you for staying and voicing your concerns. It's a long day, and we appreciate your participation. I was a member of the board in November of '22, and after receiving the objections, I did go back and look at that hearing again and considered the factors that we had considered at that time. And a good portion of that was the fact that the building was well below the level of the road at the time, and raising it, at least with a perspective from most of the neighborhood, would not be dramatically affected. And it did not affect the view towards Pickerel Pond. And I guess what I would say is that I felt that at that time that it was not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. And I think that's probably still true. It's too bad that these situations arise. Sometimes they do. And it's not necessarily the fault of the actual homeowner. But in this situation, I think we should continue to support our original approval and say that it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood.
Lee?
Yes, I agree. Well, I wasn't on the board at that time either, but I did watch the hearing from November 17th, and I went out and visited the site, and I went back and visited the site, and I went around Pickerel Pond, and I agree with my colleagues. I would have approved it in the 17th hearing, if I had been there. But I agree with my colleagues. I still don't think it's substantially more detrimental, and I would approve it today.
Jenny?
So, I'm not going to get into whether I would have approved it or not, but it was approved, because I don't need to. And what we're talking about today is whether or not to let them to continue to do the plan that was approved. And I don't feel as though I have any reason to say that you can't do that. It was a mistake, but I don't see any really authority or reason to undo what was already approved based on that mistake, so.
Dave Veach?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with my colleagues. When I look, when I look especially at this, at the photo of the previously existing house, I mean, I wasn't paying attention to this particularly during the presentation in November, but, you know, from a practical standpoint, given the plan that we approved and the existing house, they were changing openings, they're changing so much that I would imagine that the builder, in making the decision to take those walls down, was thinking that he was saving his customers money. Because in order to make the kinds of changes in the for the openings, for the fenestration, and perhaps even, I mean, I noticed they left the walls of the garage, and the studs there are 2x4s, 24 inches on center. I'm not sure that even meets current code. So to have worked around those existing walls, the things that we're now being asked to approve them taking down, would have been far more impractical and expensive to do. So that's probably, I'm gonna guess, you know, why the builder felt that, hey, I can go ahead and do this, and he didn't think about the interpretations of, you know, how it's been presented to us. So this is not, I don't think it was an historic home, and so these aren't historic materials or anything like that. So I really, to me, it's the right thing to do here is to, they're building the same design that we approved with this small addition on the front. And I see no way that that's substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, so I will approve it.
Well, I'm sorry, sir, if you heard what I said at the beginning of the meeting, deliberations are strictly up to the board. The public is not invited into it unless there was a specific member that interjected someone into the conversation. So that's why I'm not recognizing him. I agree. I think nothing's changed. I feel badly for the lady who had to leave, but as we know from court decisions, the view of a person is not the neighborhood, and therefore is not to be considered. Paul?
I will move to approve the application as submitted. I will ask that the same conditions that were initially put on the permit would be renewed, which is that all construction activity and vehicles be contained on site or at a neighboring property with the permission of the property owner, that between June 30th and Labor Day, no exterior construction will be allowed. No work shall be permitted on the weekends, and construction activity between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. only.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote on that. Ginny?
Ginny says yes.
Lee?
I vote yes.
All votes yes.
Yes.
Veach votes yes.
That's a unanimous vote, Mr. Litchfield.
Thank you very much. Again, our apologies.
Okay. Before we have let's see. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. If you're going to be away at all this winter, and that winter, to me, runs up until May or June or something, you know what I mean. Please tell Sarah so she can put it down in the big book so that we can make sure we have 5 or 6, or whatever it is that we need as we go forward. So, Paul, would you like to make a?
I'll move to adjourn.
Dave Veach seconds.
All right, everybody votes?
Jeannie votes yes.
I vote yes.
All vote yes.
I vote yes.
Randy votes yes.
Veach votes yes.
And the official time is?
7:28.
Well, I guess I'm late. I was going to.